Chapter 85. While making tea, Emotienga leaned against the table in a daze. When she came back that day, the meaning of second uncle's words was already very clear. These days, she was absent-minded and kept thinking about this matter. That day, second uncle had said that she still had 100 years to squander. Second uncle, who had always been forcing her to cultivate, had actually said those words to her. It was clear to see how bad the situation was. Second uncle had basically treated her as a dead person. Now, she no longer asked herself what she would do if second uncle died. Seeing second uncle's calm expression, she made up her mind to let second uncle, who had been worrying about her for 10 years, leave in peace. But, thinking about this result still made her sad. The tea leaves in the pot unfolded, and the tea gradually turned light green. Emotienga calmed herself down, poured a cup of tea, and handed it to second uncle. Second uncle, drink some tea. She added some mind-calming spiritual herbs to the tea, hoping second uncle would feel better after drinking it. Yi Jiang was even older now. In fact, even if a cultivator's lifespan was nearing its end, they would still be able to maintain their youthful appearance. They would not wither like mortals. The reason why he was like this was because he was injured. After drinking the tea, he seemed to be a little more spirited and asked, "Xiaoyun, last time, you said the spiritual aura in your body changed?" Emotienga nodded. Yes, it became very strange. A trace of very cold yin spiritual aura gradually appeared in my dantian, and it also swallowed other spiritual auras and transformed them into this kind of spiritual aura. I didn't know the reason, so I didn't dare to continue cultivating. Yi Jiang thought for a while, then said slowly, "It doesn't matter. You should continue cultivating." Second uncle once heard that when female cultivators practiced certain cultivation techniques, their spiritual aura would change. Presumably, it was because the cultivation technique leaned toward yin. Your situation should be because of the special nature of the cultivation technique you practice. In the past, your cultivation level wasn't high enough, so you couldn't transform it into pure yin spiritual aura. Now that you've reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm and your cultivation level is gradually increasing, the spiritual aura in your body changed. This change must be the preparation your dantian made for building your foundation. Since that's the case, you should continue cultivating and wait until your spiritual aura completely changes before building your foundation. This answer made Emotienga happy. Does that mean I'll have a better chance of building my foundation? Yi Jiang nodded. That should be the case. He thought for a while, then said, "Otherwise, you should go back to the sect." Of course, don't ask anyone. Just go to the sect's ancient records collection to check. Okay, got it. How about you go now? Second uncle isn't feeling unwell right now. Go, or else you won't be able to get away. Emotienga understood the meaning behind his words. Second uncle was worried that her injuries would worsen, so he didn't dare to refuse. She said, "All right, second uncle, be careful." Half an hour later, Emotienga returned to Yunmu sect. First, he went to the steward's hall to inform them that he had returned. Then he returned to his residence. Everything was the same as before she left. Jiang Shanghong was cultivating in his room, while Qin Shi and Lu Yidao were still in closed-door meditation, and Lu Yidao had reportedly entered his closed-door meditation Immortal's cave. Oh, there's one more thing. Senior Martial Brother Zhou has succeeded in building his foundation and has become Martial Uncle Zhou. Emotienga was very happy for him upon hearing this news. Although Martial Uncle Zhou was cold at the beginning, he was actually a good person. If the disciples living in this courtyard had any questions, he would answer them with all his heart. Moreover, it was thanks to Martial Uncle Zhou's care that she could live so comfortably here. During the 2 years she was in closed-door meditation, she didn't do anything, and it was Martial Uncle Zhou who deliberately put in a good word for her in the steward's hall. Because of this, Emotienga pondered whether she should congratulate Martial Uncle Zhou or not. In the end, she decided to ask someone to deliver a message and prepare to go after the matter was settled. After all, Martial Uncle Zhou lived in the North Peak now, so it wasn't convenient for her to go there. Just as she was about to go to 10,000 Laws Pavilion, a voice came from outside. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, Is junior martial brother Yi Xiaotian in? Mo Tiange opened the door to her room and saw a male disciple she didn't know standing outside the small hall. Senior martial brother, what's the matter? Upon seeing her, the man smiled and said, Your junior martial brother Yi? Mo Tiange nodded. The man sized her up from head to toe. His gaze made her feel very uncomfortable. Then he said, It was Martial Uncle Zhou who told me to come. He heard you came back, so he wanted to see you. Mo Tiange said, I just asked this senior martial brother from the North Peak to deliver a message, and he arrived already. The man was stunned. I don't know. It's just that Martial Uncle Zhou told me to deliver a message. I see. Thank you, senior martial brother. I'll go now. The man said, I'll take you there. Presumably, you also don't know where Martial Uncle Zhou is. This man was really kind, so Mo Tiange said, Thank you, senior martial brother. You're welcome. Let's go. After leaving her room, Mo Tiange asked, May I know senior martial brother's surname? The man left in a hurry and answered without looking back, My surname is Wu. Oh, so it's senior martial brother Wu. Senior martial brother, are you an elite disciple of the North Peak? This question made senior martial brother Wu proud for a moment. His footsteps also slowed down a bit. Yes, my master's name is Qingyu. You should know him. Ah, so you're martial uncle Qingyu's brilliant disciple. It's an honor to meet you. Mo Tiange politely greeted him. This senior martial brother Wu immediately raised his chin proudly, causing her to snicker. In fact, the reason she said it was an honor to meet him was because since the senior martial brother Wu was a foundation-building martial uncle's disciple, he should be an elite disciple with a profound cultivation level. However, he looked like he was in his 30s, yet his cultivation level was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. Nevertheless, it wasn't strange. This senior martial brother Wu only had a cultivation level in the 7th layer, but he still called her junior martial brother. Obviously, he had something to rely on. Of course, she wouldn't say this out loud. Judging from this senior martial brother Wu's reaction just now, he was someone who cared a lot about his reputation. If she said something to him and it reached his ears, he would definitely turn hostile immediately. After walking for a while, Mo Tiange asked curiously, Senior martial brother Wu, which road is this? Does it lead to Tongbei Peak? This senior martial brother Wu walked very fast without looking back. Martial Uncle Zhou just came to the South Peak to take care of business. Quickly follow me. Mo Tiange frowned and followed him for a while. Seeing that the road was becoming more and more desolate, she immediately stopped and said, Senior martial brother Wu. Senior martial brother Wu didn't answer her. After walking a few steps and realizing that she wasn't following him, he finally turned his head and said unhappily, What are you doing? Mo Tiange swept her gaze over her surroundings and stared at him vigilantly. Where in the world does senior martial brother Wu want to take me? Upon hearing her question, senior martial brother Wu's eyes suddenly flickered. He stammered, Nothing. Judging from his expression, it would be strange if Mo Tiange believed him. She immediately took out her spirit tool to be on guard and said coldly, Senior martial brother Wu, do you think I'm a fool? If we go down this road, we'll reach a cliff at the end. Do you think Martial Uncle Zhou will meet me at the cliff? Seeing that his purpose was seen through, this person cast a glance to the side, then clenched his teeth and said loudly, Junior martial brother, it's too late to leave now. Mo Tiange smiled contemptuously. Senior martial brother Wu, do you think you can stop me? This person obviously didn't expect that she would turn hostile and actually not take him seriously at all. He immediately stammered, Junior martial brother Yi, we can talk about this. Mo Tiange was surprised to see his reaction. This person was an elite disciple, so how could he be so spineless? But she clearly knew there was a problem, so how could she continue following him? Besides, this person was an elite disciple after all, so it wouldn't be good for her to attack him. She immediately turned around and walked away without saying anything. Junior martial brother Yi. She didn't even respond. Soon after, she felt a spiritual aura fluctuation behind her. Mo Tiange reacted very quickly and dodged, but she immediately broke out in a cold sweat. What was attacking her was actually a high-level blue sea freezing ice talisman. If she was hit just now, she would probably be frozen on the spot and be trampled on. What does this senior martial brother Wu want to do? Seeing that she was glaring at him fiercely, senior martial brother Wu first looked scared, then angry. Finally, he took out another talisman. High-level talismans weren't cheap, and they were also very powerful. Even ordinary talismans weren't easy to deal with if there were many of them. In the previous fights of magical power, Xianxia always tried her best to avoid directly facing the opponent's talismans. Usually, the outcome of the fight would be decided before the opponent's talismans were used. But now, because she didn't want to fight, senior martial brother Wu took the initiative. Senior martial brother Wu, she asked coldly, what's your objective? I don't think I've offended you, have I? At that moment, a very slippery voice answered, you haven't offended him. The one you've offended is me. Xianxia turned her head to look and was shocked. Not far from her, a person was walking down the path leading to the valley. It was Jiang Qingxian. Her expression changed and her mind raced. The first thing she thought of was that she picked up the pill recipe for the constitution-enhancing pill that he accidentally missed. However, she was also puzzled as to how he discovered it. Soon after, she thought about it. Jiang Qingxian was hiding here, but she didn't sense him at all even when he approached her. He must have used a breath-concealing technique, which meant he must have long been prepared to deal with her. But if she killed Jiang Qingxian, would she still have a foothold in Mount Yunwu? That Mount Yunwu's master would most likely eat her alive and cook her alive. That's not right. If he was a core formation cultivator from Jiang clan, would he need to deal with her like this? She was only a small aura refining cultivator. To a core formation cultivator, she was nothing more than an ant that could be pinched to death. However, the current situation didn't allow her to think too much. She reached into her Qiankuan bag and several formation discs and flags flew out. Jiang Qingxian snorted contemptuously, then angrily said to senior martial brother Wu, really useless. You can't do anything at all. Go stand guard. In front of Jiang Qingxian, senior martial brother Wu immediately lowered his head and bowed. Yes, senior martial brother Jiang. Xianxia couldn't help but snort. So this senior martial brother Wu was Jiang Qingxian's little follower. No wonder he was so spineless. Once senior martial brother Wu walked far away, Jiang Qingxian turned around to size up the 5 elements life and death formation she laid temporarily. A mocking expression appeared on his face. Using formations to deal with me? Xianxia suddenly remembered that Jiang Qingxian had a heaven-breaking mirror in his hand. It was precisely a magic weapon that could restrain formations. At this time, Jiang Qingxian indeed took out that mirror. A blue light shot out from the mirror and shone on her formation disc. With a loud boom, the formation disc immediately exploded. This formation was modified to be suitable for temporary formations, but its power was still somewhat lacking. Xianxia's expression changed, but she soon calmed down and sneered. So what if I don't use formations? What do I have to fear? You. Jiang Qingxian naturally knew she was mocking him for not being skilled in Daoist techniques, so he immediately shouted angrily. Xianxia stared at him and asked in a heavy voice, may I know how I offended senior martial brother Jiang? Why did senior martial brother Jiang set such a trap to deal with me? Upon hearing her question, Jiang Qingxian burst into laughter. After laughing for a long time, he finally said mockingly, even if I didn't believe you were the one who followed me and took away the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pill, judging from your reaction, I believe it. Do you still think I don't know? Xianxia originally didn't believe in luck. She just thought she would confess without being pressed if Jiang Qingxian didn't do it because of this matter, so she asked again. Now that she knew it was because of this matter, she wasn't disappointed. She already knew she had a slim chance of survival, so she calmed down and stopped thinking about other things. She asked, then, how did senior martial brother Jiang know? Chapter 86. Xianxia couldn't figure it out. She was obviously very careful in everything, so how did this hedonistic son know she was the one who took it? At that moment, Jiang Qingshian's gaze suddenly became very strange. His gaze was filled with malice, making Mo Tiange feel like she was a fish on the chopping block, waiting to be slaughtered. Jiang Qingshian looked at her with great interest and said, "Do you know how I found out the recipe for constitution-enhancing pill was in that boy's hands?" A slight frown appeared on Mo Tiange's face as she said, "Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, please speak." Jiang Qingshian, however, didn't care about her attitude. He just laughed arrogantly and proudly said, "There's no harm in telling you now. I'm so lucky. Great-grandfather sent me to the Tiandao sect to do some work so that I can make friends with some famous disciples. Unexpectedly, as soon as he arrived at the Huanshan dock, he saw that lad asking if there were any purple Ganoderma older than 500 years in the store. Naturally, the store didn't have any. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, but I happened to bump into him in another shop. He was selling constitution-enhancing pills. That store owner is ignorant and doesn't know what it is, but I know what the constitution-enhancing pill is." Then I asked junior brother Qin to pretend to have a conflict with him, to probe his background and figure out if there was an expert behind him. So that was how it was. Presumably, this individual cultivator hadn't heard about the commotion caused by the constitution-enhancing pill, so he'd used the constitution-enhancing pill to exchange for spirit stones to buy materials. As a result, he'd attracted a disaster and lost his life. That's right, purple Ganoderma. She could more or less guess how she was discovered. At the Tiandao Sex Hu clan, did you arrive at the auction early and saw me buying the purple Ganoderma? Jiang Chengxian burst into laughter. You don't know, do you? When I came to the Tiandao sect, I went to the Hu clan to handle some matters. I also became friends with the Hu clan, so I was already in the room next to the counter. I heard that someone was buying a purple Ganoderma, so I went to take a look out of curiosity. I didn't expect to see you again. The more I looked at you, the more familiar you seemed. Later, I finally remembered that you were also a disciple of Yunwu sect. After listening up to this point, how could Mo Tiange still not understand? She had underestimated him. Now that she thought about it, the only time she saw Jiang Qingshian's behavior was when she first entered Yunwu sect and saw him beating up Jiang Shanghong on the road. How could she be certain that Jiang Qingshian was an idiot just because of that? Besides, even if he beat up Jiang Shanghong, could it prove that he was incompetent? Since Jiang Qingshian grew up in a big clan and had a core formation cultivator as a direct descendant, even if he was originally a waste, he could still be taught to be a schemer. However, it was too late now. She knew what mistake she had made, but it was a mistake that could not be made up for. Jiang Qingshian continued, "Fortunately, at that time, I didn't dare to make a move in Hu clan's territory and went to the Huanshan dock. Sure enough, the innkeeper confirmed that you did not go back that night. Then I found someone who seemed to know you." At this point, he deliberately paused, but Mo Tiange's whole body turned cold. "Tianxiao." She gritted her teeth and asked, "What did you do to Tianxiao? What happened?" At this moment, Jiang Qingshian finally couldn't hold back his complacency and burst into loud laughter. His eyes were clearly filled with evilness that would make anyone who saw him feel nauseous. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, if you were dressed as a woman, you'd definitely be a delicate and pretty woman. Why do you have to dress like this?" Her secret was suddenly exposed, but Mo Tiange just stood there in a daze and didn't say anything for a long time. She felt very desperate. She didn't know whether it was because of Tianxiao or because of herself. Jiang Qingshian sized her up, seemingly already considering where to start. He said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you mustn't misunderstand your good sister. She would rather die than say anything. That's why I killed her husband in front of her and searched her soul. Only then did I realize that you're really not simple." Soul searching. This word caused Mo Tiange's eyes to widen. She clenched her fists so tightly that her nails almost embedded into her palms. Soul searching could be said to be the cruelest spell in the cultivation world. It used a secret technique to extract a person's memory while they were still alive. The person whose soul was searched would suffer a fate worse than death. However, this spell could only be used on cultivators whose cultivation levels were one realm lower than the casters. Jiang Chengxian was only an aura-refining cultivator, so he couldn't use the soul-searching technique on Meng Sigue. However, he could use it on Tianxiao. Even a cultivator would become an idiot if the soul-searching technique was used on them, let alone a mortal. Tianxiao was already dead. She was dead because of her. Mo Tiange took a deep breath and felt extremely calm. She said slowly, "Other people might not know who Yi Shaotian is, but you're from Yunwu sect. Therefore, you immediately came back to lay a trap and waited for me to walk right into your trap." Jiang Chengxian smiled and said, "Correct. Junior martial brother Yi, you're very smart. Unfortunately, sometimes you're too smart for your own good. Although in your eyes, I'm not a smart person, the things your sister knows are already enough." After some thought, "I can roughly guess why you disguised yourself as a man. Pure Yin constitution. Ha! Heaven is really helping me. How could I let you off?" Mo Tiange, on the other hand, was very calm. She said faintly, "In that case, senior martial brother Jiang didn't tell anyone about this?" Jiang Chengxian said, "Of course. How could I let other people have a share of the loot?" "Even your grandfather didn't tell you?" This question made Jiang Chengxian pause for a moment. He indeed didn't tell his grandfather because he was afraid his great-grandfather wouldn't give him this benefit. In any case, in the split second he was distracted, Mo Tiange moved her wrist. In a flash, several flying needles were shot straight at his vital points. His reaction was a bit slow, so he was immediately pierced by several needles, causing him to fall to the ground. With spirit tools and talismans clasped in her hands, Mo Tiange said coldly, "I know since you dared to fight me alone, you must have some kind of unique skill, but I'm not a pushover." Anger appeared in Jiang Chengxian's eyes. When she shot out the talismans, he touched his Qiankuan bag and a small and exquisite light shield appeared in front of him, blocking all the attacks. Mo Tiange immediately controlled her greenwood sword to rush forward. Sure enough, Jiang Chengxian was flustered. After being attacked by many talismans, the light shield on his body was already shaking and on the verge of breaking. Now that Mo Tiange was closing in on him, he could only retreat and take out several things from his Qiankuan bag. Seeing the large number of talismans in his hands, Mo Tiange frowned and quickly retreated. In fights of magical power, aura-refining cultivators relied too much on talismans, so she didn't have any advantage against the descendants of clans. If Jiang Chengxian didn't have these talismans, dealing with him would have been very easy. However, he used a high-grade defensive talisman to block all her attacks. Mo Tiange took out another talisman and decided to risk it all. Although the talismans she had weren't as high-grade as Jiang Chengxian's, it wasn't like she didn't have a chance to win. However, Jiang Chengxian once again searched his Qiankuan bag and threw something out. Mo Tiange quickly dodged it and threw an earth-splitting talisman. Jiang Chengxian once again slapped a defensive talisman on his body. The corners of his mouth curved into a sinister smile as he stared behind her. In an instant, a surge of spiritual aura rushed towards her from behind. Mo Tiange dodged, but when she turned around to see what was behind her, her expression couldn't help but change. It was a rope-like magic weapon overflowing with spiritual aura. As if it had eyes, it rushed straight towards her. Under the pursuit of this magic weapon, Mo Tiange didn't even have the strength to throw more talismans. She could only run away. Aura-refining cultivators used spirit tools, foundation-building cultivators used magic tools, and core formation cultivators and above used magic weapons. Magic weapons were originally refined by core formation cultivators and above, so how could their power be compared to spirit tools? Even if aura-refining cultivators could only display a little bit of their power, they still weren't something cultivators in the same realm as them could deal with. At this moment, Mo Tiange was filled with regret. It wasn't that she didn't have any magic weapons on her, she had that enchanting lantern. However, she never had the time to refine it, so she couldn't use it. Another talisman rushed towards her. She dodged with great difficulty, but her footsteps stagnated. In an instant, the thing behind her sprang forward and firmly bound her. The spiritual aura in her body stagnated and she fell to the ground. Seeing that she was firmly bound, Jiang Chengxian stopped and burst out laughing. I begged my great-grandfather for this dragon-trapping rope. What do you think? Can you still move? Dragon-trapping rope. Correct, dragon-trapping rope. Even a core formation cultivator would be bound if they weren't careful. Jiang Chengxian walked forward complacently. Sensing that all the spiritual aura in her body was imprisoned by the dragon-trapping rope and that she didn't even have any room to resist, Tienge suddenly felt powerless. She had been cautious for 10 years, but because of a moment of carelessness, she actually revealed something and trapped herself in a dangerous situation. Jiang Chengxian cautiously pulled out several flying needles from his body. When his injuries were slightly better, he walked towards her and pulled the Qiankuan bag from her waist. He opened it to take a look and was astonished. There's actually so many things? The way he looked at Tienge changed. What a pity, what a pity. You're also a character, but you were born with the wrong gender. If you want to blame someone, blame the heavens. Under Tienge's glare, Jiang Chengxian stuffed her Qiankuan bag into his robe and leaned closer to look at her face. After staring for a while, he pulled down her hair bun and lifted her face. TSK, you don't look bad. Although you can't be considered an outstanding beauty, you can still be considered a beauty. Tienge turned her head away in disgust. If she had the chance, she would definitely chop off those disgusting hands of hers. Jiang Chengxian didn't get angry. Instead, he said with a smile, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, don't blame me for being too insensitive. In this place, we have to do good deeds. I don't want any problems to occur. Tienge tilted her head, revealing a sneer on her face. She naturally knew what Jiang Chengxian wanted to do, but she wasn't stupid enough to think begging for mercy would work. If she could keep her life today, she would definitely make this person pay tenfold in the future. Seeing her like this made Jiang Chengxian even happier. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, your appearance is much better than those wooden beauties. Why didn't I think of this? Hot beauties also have a different taste. Tienge didn't feel like paying attention to him and just acted as if she couldn't feel anything. However, when those disgusting hands touched her, she still opened her eyes angrily. Get lost. Jiang Chengxian laughed cheerfully. It's time to unravel the mystery. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, what are you wearing? It's so hard, I can't even feel it. You're wearing really thick clothes, but it doesn't matter. I'm very happy to undress a beauty. Tienge firmly bit her lip until it bled. She endured the hands groping her body and told herself that she must endure it. Although she wished she could die, she would never commit suicide because of this. She wanted to live until the day she could chop this person into pieces. Nevertheless, this kind of humiliation made the rims of her eyes moisten. Chapter 87. With a blood-curdling scream, the hands on her body disappeared. Tienge opened her eyes in a daze. She saw that Jiang Chengxian, who was doing whatever he wanted a moment ago, was now lying on the ground. There was a big hole in his chest from which blood was gushing out, and he was no longer breathing. She looked up and saw Jiang Shanghong's gloomy face. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. She was almost speechless and felt exhausted. When those hands were groping her body, she wasn't afraid because the nauseating feeling washed away her fear. Now, she finally felt a lingering fear. After her mood calmed down a little, she remembered that even if Jiang Chengxian was dead, if Jiang Shanghong also had some ideas, her situation wouldn't be any different. She looked down nervously. Fortunately, her undergarments hadn't been taken off, so not even an inch of her skin was exposed. However, she didn't know whether Jiang Shanghong heard what Jiang Chengxian said or not. When she looked up, she saw that Jiang Shanghong was also in a daze. His soul seemed to have left his body, and his face was covered in sweat. Only now did Tienge realize that the person he just killed was his own cousin. Although the two of them used to be more like enemies than brothers, they were still different from other people. His mind must be in a mess right now, right? With this thought in mind, she tentatively called out, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang? Jiang Shanghong suddenly woke up. He wiped the sweat on his forehead and looked at her. Soon after, he walked over and pulled off the dragon-trapping rope on her body. Jiang Chengxian was already dead, so the dragon-trapping rope was easily pulled off. He said, "Get up." Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing what he said. Jiang Shanghong's behavior was normal. Apparently, he arrived later and didn't hear what Jiang Chengxian said. She stood up, turned around and tied up her clothes. She then turned around and cupped her hands. "Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Jiang, for saving my life." The way she addressed him now carried a hint of gratitude. No matter what Jiang Shanghong was like in the past, it was a fact that he saved her today. Jiang Shanghong's expression had already returned to his former self. He answered indifferently, "No need to thank me. You saved me once, so I'm just paying you back." Mo Tiange was stunned. Did he say, "What happened 3 years ago"? That should be it. The two of them only crossed paths once. 3 years ago, when Senior Martial Brother Jiang was beaten up by Jiang Chengxian, she happened to see it, so she secretly brought him back. Later on, she even resented him for not knowing what was good for him. But as it turned out, Senior Martial Brother Jiang wasn't that indifferent and heartless. Although he acted like he didn't care, he still remembered 3 years later. Mo Tiange couldn't help but think that in the cultivation world, people didn't necessarily have to be selfish to the end. When considering things for themselves, helping others out a bit more might be the same as planting good karma for themselves. In the cycle of karma, there were not only evil consequences, but also good ones. With this thought in mind, she no longer felt uncomfortable as she looked at Jiang Shanghong, who was still covered in a gloomy and cold aura. Honestly speaking, Jiang Shanghong simply didn't like being with them. His words weren't pleasant to hear, and his attitude was cold, but there wasn't anything bad about him. But how did he know that he was in danger, and how did he come so timely? Mo Tiange stared at the corpse on the ground. Jiang Shanghong had already lowered his body to search Jiang Chengxian's corpse. She couldn't help but ask, "Senior Brother Jiang, how did you know I was in danger?" Jiang Shanghong didn't raise his head and only said, "I know that person." "The person who told you to come. That's Senior Brother Wu?" Mo Tiange finally understood. Jiang Shanghong had always been cultivating inside the house, so when that Senior Brother Wu came to look for her, he knew that person was Jiang Chengxian's attendant. What Martial Uncle Zhou wanted to see her, and so on were all lies. When she realized this, Mo Tiange finally realized how lucky she was. If it wasn't because Jiang Shanghong happened to be inside the house and overheard their conversation, she really would've. Then what about that person now? Jiang Chengxian told him to watch over her. "Killed him," Jiang Shanghong said faintly. Mo Tiange was once again stunned. This Senior Brother Jiang was also very cruel and merciless. When he needed to kill someone, he didn't show any mercy. But now, she had a different impression of Jiang Shanghong. She actually thought this was a good thing. In the cultivation world, when it was time to be cruel, one couldn't show any mercy. Otherwise, one wouldn't be able to survive. At this moment, Jiang Shanghong had already found 2 Qiankuan bags. He threw the one she had taken back to her and asked, "Is this yours?" Mo Tiange took it. "Yes, thank you." After he finished searching, Jiang Shanghong stood up and said with a frown, "Junior, Martial Brother Yi, you disguised yourself as a man and entered Yunwu sect. What's your purpose?" His tone was still cold and gloomy, but Mo Tiange didn't feel uncomfortable listening to it. Maybe it was because her opinion of him had changed, or maybe it was because he wasn't questioning her. Mo Tiange smiled bitterly and answered, "If I said I didn't have a purpose, would Senior Brother Jiang believe me?" Jiang Shanghong said, "It doesn't matter whether I believe you or not. In any case, I'm not interested in your business. It's just that both of us can't escape responsibility for today's matter." Speaking of this, Mo Tiange naturally knew. When she was fighting against Jiang Chengxian, she already thought about this problem. If she killed Jiang Chengxian, she couldn't stay on Mount Yunwu any longer. She had to escape quickly to avoid being caught by Jiang clan's people. Moreover, Jiang clan had 2 core formation cultivators, so it was really... She heaved a sigh and said, "This matter? I implicated Senior Martial Brother. I'm truly sorry." Upon hearing what she said, Jiang Shanghong finally revealed a trace of disappointment on his face. However, he still said resolutely, "Since I'm willing to make a move, I naturally don't care. I've long wanted to leave this Jiang clan." "You want to leave Jiang clan?" Mo Tiange was surprised. Even if Jiang Shanghong wasn't valued by Jiang clan, in the end he was still under a big tree. He still hadn't built his foundation, so if he left Jiang clan, it would be inconvenient for him in the future. Jiang Shanghong sneered. "The last time I went home, I found out that my grandmother, the only one left alive, had already passed away. My grandmother was only immortal and had a minor illness. They only needed to casually make a move to solve it, but they didn't care. What reason do I have to stay?" Perhaps the two of them were in the same boat now, so he blurted out these words. However, right after he finished speaking, he seemed to be somewhat regretful and immediately said, "Enough with the nonsense. Now that things have come to this, we better leave quickly. If we delay and someone finds out, we'll lose our lives." Mo Tiange nodded. "Senior Martial Brother Jiang, I won't be polite with you anymore. I definitely won't be able to wash my hands clean of this matter. That surnamed Wu came to look for me, so someone will definitely know. At that time, their deaths will definitely be traced back to me. However, it'll be easy for you to escape." Jiang Shanghong said, "I don't dare to rely on luck. I'll take this opportunity to leave. If they all go after you, it'll be easy for me to escape." Mo Tiange also understood this principle. If the two of them committed a crime and Jiang Shanghong was in the dark, it would be easier for him to conceal it. Mo Tiange didn't feel unhappy. After all, the cause was herself, so she immediately nodded. "I know." After the two of them reached an agreement, Jiang Shanghong lowered his head to size up Jiang Qingxian's corpse. Soon after, he used the quicksand technique to dispose of Jiang Qingxian's corpse. Once Jiang Qingxian's corpse sank into the ground and disappeared, Jiang Shanghong once again searched for something inside Jiang Qingxian's Jiankuan bag. In the end, he took out a bottle of medicinal pills. When he poured them out and saw that there were actually 4 or 5 pills inside, his expression immediately darkened. Mo Tiange was confused. "Senior Martial Brother Jiang, what's wrong?" Jiang Shanghong tossed the medicinal pills back, but he hesitated for a moment. In the end, he poured out 2 pills and handed them to her. "These are Jiang Clan's foundation refining pills. Take one when you build your foundation. It can increase your chances of building your foundation." Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows in astonishment as she stared at the medicinal pill in her hand. She had long heard that Jiang Clan had medicinal pills that could assist in building the foundation, but Jiang Shanghong didn't get any. No wonder he had that kind of expression a moment ago. He'd already obtained foundation building pills and was about to build his foundation, but he hadn't even seen a single one. Now, however, he actually found 5 pills on Jiang Qingxian's body. How biased was Jiang Clan? At this moment, she already felt that it was a good thing that Jiang Shanghong left the Jiang Clan. They usually bullied him, ignored him and his family, and were even biased to such an important matter like building his foundation. Even if he stayed in Jiang Clan, he wouldn't get any benefits. Mo Tiange hesitated as she stared at the foundation refining pills in her hand. "Senior Martial Brother Jiang, you still want to give me such a precious thing?" Jiang Shanghong said, "Every time you take a foundation refining pill, its effect will decrease a bit. After 3 pills, its effect won't be that great anymore. I'll take these 2 pills as a reward for helping me divert the danger away." What he said was reasonable, so Mo Tiange nodded and put the 2 medicinal pills away. Soon after, she thought of something and said, "Senior Martial Brother Jiang, can you look around? Is there a type of medicinal pill you don't recognize?" Jiang Shanghong looked at her suspiciously. Mo Tiange simply said, "He has constitution-enhancing pills on him." Jiang Shanghong's eyes widened in shock. He obviously knew what constitution-enhancing pills were. He asked her, "How did you know?" Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. "I offended him because of this." She didn't explain in detail. Even if Jiang Shanghong saved her life, it was better not to mention that she had the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills. Jiang Shanghong also didn't ask any more. After searching for a while, he indeed found a jade bottle inside Jiang Qingxian's Jiankuan bag. He opened the bottle and saw 2 white medicinal pills with a strong medicinal fragrance. Seems like it's these, Tiange said happily. These 2 medicinal pills were exactly the same as the ones recorded in the jade slip. When she saw the pill Jiang Shanghong handed her, she waved her hand. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, you don't need to give it to me. Just take it as me repaying Senior Marshal Brother Jiang's kindness. Since she already had the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills, why should she fight with Jiang Shanghong over these 2 pills? In any case, he saved her life and gave her 2 foundation-refining pills. She wasn't someone who couldn't tell good from bad. Jiang Shanghong didn't suspect anything and directly put the medicinal pills away. Constitution-enhancing pills were indeed rare, but they could only show their value after taking a lot of other medicinal pills for a long time. These 2 pills really couldn't be considered much. They weren't even as valuable as foundation-refining pills. After they finished dividing the spoils, Jiang Shanghong said, "All right, we can't delay any longer. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, let's run for our lives." Tiange naturally knew that time was precious, so she didn't say anything unnecessary. She just cupped her hands and said, "Take care, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. We'll meet again if fate allows it." She then turned around and walked away. A voice came from behind her. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi." Tiange turned around. Jiang Shanghong, however, raised the corners of his mouth and pointed at his own head. Only then did Tiange realize that her hair was still loose. She hastily picked up the hairpin on the ground and tied it into a Daoist bun. After saying their goodbyes once again, Tiange walked down the mountain. She couldn't help but feel absurd. After getting along with him for 3 years, she only treated Jiang Shanghong as a stranger. She never expected that when she ran into a disaster, it would be him who came to her rescue. Unfortunately, the 2 of them had just gotten a little closer, but now they had to run for their lives separately. Tiange didn't know whether they would have the chance to meet again in the future. The matters of this world really made people sigh with emotion. Chapter 88. After saying goodbye to Jiang Shanghong, Tiange didn't immediately go down the mountain. Instead, she turned into a colonel. After checking that there was no one around, she laid a simple concealment formation and quickly changed her clothes. Although she was only an aura-refining disciple in the sect, if she went down the mountain without any disguise, Jiang clan would easily find her whereabouts. Fortunately, Jiang Qingxian didn't tell anyone about her. As long as she changed her clothes, presumably, no one would suspect her afterward. She changed into women's clothes and tied her hair into a simple bun. After confirming there were no problems, she swaggered away. Yunwu sect had many disciples, and there were disciples coming and going every day. Sure enough, she wasn't noticed on the way down the mountain and smoothly reached the market square at the foot of the mountain. After making many turns, she returned to the small courtyard and pushed the door open. "Second uncle." Yi Jiang, who was still meditating in the corner, was startled by her. "Xiaotian? Why did you change back into women's clothes?" Tiange said anxiously, "Second uncle, let's go. I've caused trouble." "What? I killed the direct descendant of the sect's core formation grandmaster." These words shocked Yi Jiang. "What's going on?" Tiange said anxiously, "I'll tell you on the way. Second uncle, let's go first." Yi Jiang thought for a moment. This child never exaggerated things, so he immediately propped himself up. "Quickly take the things you need to take with you. We'll go now." The uncle and nephew pair moved very fast. In less than a quarter of an hour, they had packed all the things they needed to take with them. After walking out of the market square on Mount Yunwu, Yi Jiang took out a horsetail whisk magic tool and the 2 of them rode it to leave Mount Yunwu. "Second uncle, can you hold on?" Tiange couldn't help but feel guilty when she saw her pale second uncle, who hadn't traveled for a long time, controlling the magic tool. Second uncle didn't have much time left, but he was forced to flee because of her. If there was an accident on the way, Yi Jiang shook his head with a calm expression. "It's nothing. It won't consume much spiritual aura to travel. Tell me what happened first." Emo Tienga told him everything that happened today. When she finished, she asked, "Second uncle, can we escape?" As he listened to her story, Yi Jiang's expression was solemn. At this time, he didn't speak for a long time. In the end, he only sighed and said, "Do you know what you did wrong now?" Emo Tienga lowered her head. "I was too arrogant. I didn't take other people seriously." Yi Jiang said, "It's good that you understand. A fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. Don't do it again in the future. A few days ago, you said that you met an old friend. Why didn't you tell me that you revealed your secret?" Ashamed, Emo Tienga said, "I forgot." This answer caused Yi Jiang to frown slightly. "Did you think that the other party was only a small cultivator and immortal, and that they couldn't do anything to you, so you didn't take them seriously?" Emo Tienga hesitated for a moment before she nodded. "And Xianxia? I believe she won't say anything. Besides, they don't know where I am, so where can they find Yi Xiaodian?" "Nonsense!" Yi Jiang reprimanded her sternly. "You have to remember that a secret can only be called a secret if it's not spoken. There's a saying among mortals, walls have ears, and there's another saying, a freak combination of factors, there's nothing certain in this world. What you thought was indeed correct. Under normal circumstances, even if the two of them had bad intentions, they still couldn't do anything to you. However, you also didn't expect that this secret would be discovered by someone who knew who Yi Xiaodian was, did you?" Emo Tienga silently received his scolding. She then listened to second uncle saying, "In the past few years, second uncle hasn't been by your side all the time. I didn't expect that I'd actually let you develop such an arrogant temper. You're a bit smart, but how many cultivators aren't smart? Do you think you're amazing just because you've fought a few battles and can defeat most cultivators in the same realm as you? If you have this kind of idea, you might as well go back and seek death." After he finished speaking, Yi Jiang suddenly felt dizzy. His lifespan was almost up, and he was seriously injured. Although he was still a foundation-building cultivator, his body was a lot weaker. Emo Tienga noticed this and hastily supported him. "Second uncle." After swallowing a medicinal pill, Yi Jiang waved his hand and said, "Also, you have to know that telling a secret to someone else means you want them to bear the risk together with you. If it wasn't for the fact that your older sister knew about you, she probably wouldn't have died. If you tell others about some things, you'll only harm yourself and others." Emo Tienga bit her lip and didn't refute him. Tian Xiao was indeed killed by her. Perhaps it was because Tian Xiao remembered her warning that Jiang Chengxian saw through her, causing her to suffer a soul search. Both husband and wife lost their lives. She made a mistake, but the other two had to bear the consequences. Upon seeing her expression, Yi Jiang finally stopped scolding her. He said calmly, "All right, since it's already happened, it's useless to be sad. Right now, we should think about how to escape. I reckon we only have 1 or 2 days. After that, the other party will probably catch up to us." Emo Tienga was silent for a long time before she finally asked, "Second uncle, can we really escape?" Yi Jiang glanced at her then said solemnly, "You've made another mistake by saying this. You have to remember that no matter what kind of situation you're in, you can't give up. Sometimes, you just need to persevere a little longer and you'll be able to escape alive." Emo Tienga nodded. "I understand, second uncle." Seeing that she was obedient, Yi Jiang sighed faintly and said slowly, "Shaun, this might be the last time. Second uncle won't be able to protect you anymore. You have to grow up to be able to protect yourself, understand?" His tone was very helpless, making Emo Tienga feel a lump in her throat. "Second uncle," Yi Jiang just patted her head like he did when she was a child. In the end, the two of them stopped in a small town at the foot of a mountain in the north. They concealed their breaths, pretending to be a grandfather and granddaughter whose cultivation levels were only in the 3rd or 4th layer of the aura refining realm, and entered the town's inn. "If the other party's core formation cultivators personally attack us, we won't be able to escape no matter what. It'd be better to hide in the crowd," Yi Jiang said. Emo Tienga didn't have any objections. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Second uncle's way of handling things was more appropriate than hers. Besides, second uncle's current body really wasn't suitable for long journeys. After staying in this small town for 2 days, Tiange indeed noticed that there were a lot of foundation building cultivators flying in the sky. This place was very close to Mount Yunwu, so those were probably Yunwu Mountain's foundation building disciples who came because of her. She felt apprehensive. If they found her, second uncle's strength would be damaged, and she hadn't built her foundation yet, so she practically wouldn't have any room to resist. Shown. Huh. Tiange turned around and looked at second uncle, who was meditating on the bed. Yi Jiang looked at her leaning against the window and said faintly, "It's useless to look. Sit down and cultivate." But she really couldn't calm down. Yi Jiang stared deeply at her then sighed. His sigh made Tiange feel ashamed. It seemed she was too disappointing and let second uncle down. Yi Jiang stared at her for a long time before he finally said, "Come here. Second uncle wants to talk to you about something." Tiange obediently walked over, sat on the stool in front of the bed and said softly, "Second uncle, tell me. Xian, do you remember what happened 10 years ago?" Tiange nodded lightly. 10 years ago was the year she came to Kunwu. Yi Jingwen, a foundation-building disciple of Xianxia School, took her to Kunwu from the secular world and handed her over to second uncle. From then on, she officially embarked on the path of cultivation. Then, do you remember Xianxia School? Tiange nodded again, but she was puzzled. Second uncle, why did you mention Xianxia School? Didn't we come to East Kunwu to avoid them? Yi Jiang shook his head and sighed. Times have changed. I've been thinking about it these past 2 days. You should go to Xianxia School. Tiange was shocked. Second uncle? Yi Jiang chuckled softly. His expression was calm as if he'd already made up his mind. Xianxia School is the second biggest cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. It's very powerful in West Kunwu. If you go to Xianxia School, you can at least cultivate in peace. Second uncle. Tiange said anxiously, didn't you say they harbored evil intentions towards me? Now that we've been on the run for 10 years, why? Yi Jiang smiled bitterly and said, yes, I eavesdropped on the conversation between Yi Jingwen and Zheng Xian. Master Daoist Shoujing wanted you to join Xianxia School because he seemed to think highly of your constitution. I didn't dare to take risks, so I took you away from Mount Dongmeng that day. I've been thinking about it these past few days. Your father said Master Daoist Shoujing made a heart demon oath to him, so he handed you over to him. Now that your life is in danger and second uncle is about to pass away, no one is more suitable to be your backer than him. But Tiange paused for a while then said in a low voice, second uncle, didn't you say? Although he made a heart demon oath, if he only ordered me to perform dual cultivation with someone, it wouldn't be considered a violation of the oath. That's true, but if you don't agree even if you die, he probably won't harm your life. I originally didn't have the heart to let you suffer in Xianxia School, so I thought I still had 100 years to live. But now that I've provoked this disaster and second uncle's lifespan is almost up. Second uncle. Yi Jiang stared at her and continued to speak. Second uncle won't feel at ease letting you face a group of people who want to kill you by yourself, so let's take a gamble. Upon seeing second uncle's resolute expression, Tiange knew he had made up his mind this time. However, she herself couldn't make up her mind. Go to Xianxia School? She accidentally divulged her secret twice, and both times brought disaster upon her. How could she feel at ease living under the nose of someone who knew her secret? No, second uncle. In the future, I'll go to West Kunwu. Yunwu sect isn't a big cultivation group, so as long as I go to West Kunwu, nothing will happen. But what if your secret is divulged again? Can you escape every single time? There won't be a future. She practically shouted. Yi Jiang just shook his head resolutely. You can't guarantee that. Second uncle, Yi Jiang showed a faint smile and looked at her tenderly. Tiange, this is the first time you've worn women's clothes since you started following second uncle. These past few days, second uncle has been thinking about how adorable you were when I first saw you 10 years ago. I don't. Yes, you don't really want to be a woman, but second uncle hopes you can have this opportunity to become a real woman, not Yi Shaolin, but Tiange. He smiled again. Besides, did you know? Second uncle has been paying special attention. In the past few years, no one from Xianxia school came to catch us, which means, perhaps Master Daoist Shoujing is trustworthy. Facing second uncle's aged face, Immortal was silent. She knew second uncle wouldn't harm her, but she also knew second uncle had no other choice. Because if second uncle wasn't here, she definitely wouldn't be able to escape by herself. Chapter 89. Noises came from outside the door. Someone ran upstairs and knocked heavily on the door of an unknown room. Someone even shouted noisily, "Open the door! Open the door!" After a while, the doors of several rooms opened one after another. Someone said unkindly, "Who are you? Why are you disturbing my peace?" Someone said very respectfully, "Senior, what's your order?" An arrogant voice answered, "Xianxia sect is searching for traitors. Come out." Someone disobeyed. "This isn't Xianxia sect's territory. How can you be so arrogant?" "A heavy," was the answer. Soon after, a foundation-building cultivator's spiritual aura pressure spread out. Immortal was startled and turned to look at second uncle. At that moment, Yijiang also opened his eyes and frowned. "Second uncle?" Immortal called in a low voice. "Searching for traitors." Currently, the three groups under Xianxia sect didn't have any chaos, so they were most likely coming for her. Yijiang shook his head. "Don't be nervous. There's only one early-stage foundation-building cultivator and several aura-refining cultivators outside. If they're really coming for us, we can just run away." Immortal nodded, but she still felt uneasy. Although she dressed as a woman and second uncle rarely appeared in front of people, it wouldn't be difficult to recognize her if they were really sent by Yunwu sect to catch her. "Open the door! Open the door!" Someone finally knocked on their room. Under second uncle's signal, Immortal pretended to be annoyed at being disturbed and went to open the door. "Who's so rude?" As soon as she opened the door, she saw a Yunwu sect disciple dressed in black. Since Yunwu sect no longer existed, they called themselves Xianxia sect. Immortal stared at the aura-refining disciple and said coldly, "Fellow Daoist, what brings you here?" The aura-refining disciple who knocked on their door was about to speak, but the leading foundation-building cultivator said, "Junior, we're disciples of Mount Yunwu of Xianxia sect. We were ordered by the sect to search for traitors. Please inform your master to avoid any misunderstandings." This person spoke politely, but his tone was arrogant. Obviously, he didn't search them by force because there was a foundation-building cultivator here. When Immortal saw him, she pretended to be respectful and cupped her hands before returning to her room to report to her elders. Who would have thought that as soon as she returned to the room, second uncle's eyes would flash. He immediately pulled her hand and broke the window. "Second uncle?" Immortal was shocked. Right after they moved, those Yunwu sect disciples rushed over. When the foundation-building cultivator saw the two of them clearly, he immediately let out a thumph and used his flying magic tool to chase after them. "Second uncle, what's wrong?" She didn't understand. These people clearly hadn't noticed. Yijiang said indifferently, "You're dressed as a woman, but you haven't changed your salutation." Immortal was stunned and immediately regretted it. Usually, only men would greet them with cupped hands. If others thought about it, their status would undoubtedly fall. "Don't be in a daze," Yijiang shouted. Carrying Immortal, he steered his flying magic tool towards the west. The foundation-building cultivator chased after them for a while, but couldn't catch up to them. He stopped in annoyance, took out several summoning talismans, and sent them out before catching up again. With one chasing and the other fleeing, they flew out of the small town in an instant. Yijiang clenched his teeth, swallowed a small reversion pill, and flew away at full speed. Immortal looked at him nervously, then looked behind her. Although second uncle was in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm and his cultivation level was slightly higher, he was still injured and on the verge of passing away, so his cultivation level was reduced. Compared to this early-stage foundation-building cultivator, he didn't have much of an advantage. Moreover, his flying magic tool didn't rely on speed to win. An hour later, Mo Tiange nervously discovered that the distance between them was gradually closing. Yi Jiang exerted his strength again, but he felt a pain in his chest and his whole body went numb. He took a deep breath and swallowed another medicinal pill. Second uncle, you don't talk. Yi Jiang stuffed a talisman into her hands. This is a mountain stabilizing talisman. When the fight starts, put it on your body and hide. Mo Tiange grasped the talisman in her hand. She understood that second uncle planned to fight head-on. If they continued to chase like this, they would be caught sooner or later. It would be better to kill them directly and hide their tracks again. She clenched her fists. She couldn't tell how much she hated herself in her heart. She finally realized that compared to second uncle, she was too inferior. Without strength, what use was a little cleverness? She was still too far away from true wisdom. Right now, she couldn't do anything but let second uncle fight with his life on the line while he was injured. 2 flight lights flashed by. The one in front finally landed while the one behind stopped for a moment before following it. Yi Jiang stopped in an open space in the forest. He pushed Mo Tiange behind a rock and coldly stared at the cultivator who followed him. This cultivator looked to be in his 30s and had an arrogant expression on his face. Apparently, he was a proud figure in his cultivation group. Once he landed, he raised his chin and said, "Are you the Yi Xiaoyan's elder?" Yi Jiang didn't answer. He just waved his hand and took out a palm-sized jade plate. Upon seeing his reaction, the cultivator's expression changed. He snorted coldly and said, "Your Excellency, do you want to become enemies with Xixia sect?" Yi Jiang said, "Your Excellency was ordered to capture someone, so I definitely won't let a junior be captured. What else is there to say?" Yi Jiang's unyielding attitude made the cultivator very unhappy. He sneered and said, "Your Excellency, do you know who Yi Xiaoyan offended? You're just a foundation-building cultivator, and you're already so old. Could it be that you want to risk your life against a core formation senior?" Yi Jiang said faintly, "Enough nonsense. If you want to stop us, just go ahead and attack." Right after he finished speaking, his hand trembled and the jade plate flew into the air. At the same time, he fumbled in his Qianquan bag and a thin flying knife quietly flew out. The jade plate immediately swelled up. Yi Jiang cast several spiritual arts on it. The jade plate started to spin at lightning speed and immediately emitted a formidable spiritual aura pressure. Seeing that Yi Jiang attacked without any hesitation and that he used several techniques seamlessly, the cultivator immediately realized that his opponent was very experienced in fights of magical power. Individual cultivators were either poor and couldn't withstand a single blow, or their techniques were swift and fierce, far surpassing their peers. The person in front of him was obviously the latter. Once this thought crossed his mind, the cultivator immediately became flustered. Yi Jiang certainly wouldn't show any mercy. He cast the last spiritual art. That jade plate, which had already swelled up to the size of a mat and was glistening, flew towards the cultivator with a loud boom. The cultivator hastily dodged, but he was only able to dodge the attack by a powerful spiritual aura pressure. Immediately, he felt a great pain in his lungs. Yi Jiang's attack was successful, but he wasn't much better off. His complexion became even paler, and his old face gradually turned ashen. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. "Second uncle." Mo Tiange hastily stepped forward to support his tottering body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the cultivator regained his composure. A murderous intent flashed across his face, and his flying sword flew towards the two of them. Yi Jiang opened his eyes and used the last of his strength to push Mo Tiange away. The jade plate returned to his hand to block the attack. The two spiritual auras tangled together and started fighting against each other. Blood continuously flowed from the corners of his mouth. Yi Jiang looked at his ferocious opponent and resisted with difficulty. At that moment, Mo Tiange couldn't afford to hide anymore. She took out all the talismans she had and threw them at the cultivator. But it was useless. The other party only propped up a protective cover. All of her attacks were useless. This was the difference between the aura-refining realm and the foundation-building realm. She couldn't help him at all. He spat out another mouthful of blood. The jade plate made a crisp sound and broke into pieces along with the opponent's flying sword. The fragments of the jade plate and the flying sword tumbled down. At the same time, Yi Jiang was also exhausted. Seeing this, the opponent took out another flying sword and was about to kill him. However, just as he was about to release the flying sword, he lowered his head in disbelief and looked at his chest. Just now, when he wasn't paying attention, a flying knife entered his chest and took his life. The two of them fell to the ground at the same time. Second uncle. Mo Tiange rushed forward, took out some healing medicinal pills in a panic and fed them to him. Yi Jiang swallowed the medicinal pills with difficulty, but he spat out another mouthful of blood. Second uncle, hold on a little longer. There's still medicine here and, after a long time, Yi Jiang finally stopped vomiting blood and said with difficulty, "Quick, let's go." Mo Tiange nodded with tears streaming down her face. She cleaned up the scene and temporarily covered up the traces of the fight. She then helped second uncle up and staggered down the mountain. Several hours later, Mo Tiange and second uncle arrived at the small village at the foot of the mountain. There were many mortals living in this small village. Mo Tiange didn't dare to disturb them and just quietly settled down in a dilapidated house outside the village. Second uncle, second uncle. Yi Jiang finally woke up. He opened his eyes with difficulty, took out a jade tablet from his Qianquan bag, and gave it to her. Mo Tiange took it in a daze. This. Yi Jiang's breathing was weak. Crush it? This was a 10,000 miles sound-transmitting talisman. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still crushed the jade tablet according to second uncle's instructions. Once the jade tablet was crushed, a bright light burst out from inside. It lasted for a long time before it was extinguished. In a daze, Mo Tiange felt that the aura inside this jade tablet seemed very familiar. Seeing that she crushed the jade tablet, Yi Jiang heaved a sigh of relief. With her help, he sat up and swallowed a medicinal pill to heal his injuries. At the same time, in the sky above Mount Yunwu, many foundation-building cultivators were flying here and there. After another hour, Yi Jiang finally opened his eyes. Second uncle. Mo Tiange was pleasantly surprised. Second uncle, are you all right? Yi Jiang shook his head gently. His breath was still weak. Second uncle, I can't hold on anymore. Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Can't hold on anymore? Does that mean? Yi Jiang leaned against the wall, panting weakly. It's useless. The medicinal pills are useless. Second uncle used his spiritual aura by force just now and aggravated his injuries. Second uncle. Tears fell uncontrollably from her eyes. She murmured, Second uncle, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's all because I'm too stupid. Yi Jiang smiled and held her hand. Children always make mistakes. Second uncle is very happy to be able to watch you grow up. He looked up at the sky outside and sighed. I just hope it's not too late. Mo Tiange didn't feel any less guilty. If it weren't for her, second uncle wouldn't have had to flee West Kunwu. If it weren't for her, second uncle wouldn't have been seriously injured by the lightning beast. If it weren't for her, second uncle wouldn't have had to force himself to fight. It's all because of that hateful constitution. If I knew this would happen, what harm would there have been in going to Xianxia school? Second uncle might have had a chance to form his gold core, and Tianxiao wouldn't have been implicated by me. Compared to the life and death of my family, what was losing the freedom to marry? As time passed, the cultivators finally found traces of a fight in the forest that had been covered up. With this as the center, they began to search step by step. At this moment, a flight light with an astonishing momentum appeared in the sky above Mount Yunwu. It was 100 times stronger than a foundation building cultivators, and it was flying towards the west. Chapter 90. Mo Tiange was in a daze. Second uncle had been unconscious several times, and his condition was getting worse and worse. She knew second uncle was already injured and his lifespan was almost up. This time, he forced himself to fight and his injuries broke out, so his lifespan was almost depleted. She stared at second uncle who was in a coma, her mind blank. She even thought about letting them catch her. Xiao died because of her, and second uncle was about to leave. What was the point of her staying? In the past 20 years, the people she cared about all left her. Father, mother, Xiao, second uncle. What was left of her? She was all alone. So what if she became an immortal? She'd rather be immortal forever. Xiaotian. Yi Jiang said weakly. Mo Tiange jumped up and hurriedly leaned towards him. Second uncle, I'm here. Yi Jiang opened his eyes and mustered the last of his energy. Listen, no one comes, you take out that psychic jade pendant and mention Xianxia School and Master Daoist Shoujing's names. Presumably, if Jiang clan wants to deal with you, they'll have to think. Mo Tiange nodded lightly. I understand. Yi Jiang closed his eyes again and murmured, Xianxia School is thousands of miles away from here. I wonder if there are any disciples nearby. Mo Tiange knew that the sound-transmitting talisman second uncle sent just now was given to second uncle along with her father's belongings when Yi Jingwen brought her to him. Second uncle originally kept it just in case, but he didn't expect it would actually come in handy. But she really didn't have any expectations. This place was thousands of miles away from Xianxia School. Even if Master Daoist Shoujing received the message and immediately called the nearby disciples to help, they might not be able to make it in time. After such a long time, those Yunwu sect cultivators probably already found the place where the fight took place. As for Master Daoist Shoujing, they originally left on their own. It was already good enough that he was willing to send people here for her father's sake, but he might not do his best to save them. Besides, so what if they used Xianxia School's name? With such a long distance, they really couldn't intimidate those Yunwu sect disciples. Nevertheless, she wasn't afraid. She had been mentally prepared for this for 10 years. She had to try her best to live, but if she fell into that kind of situation, she wouldn't be afraid even if she died. In any case, no one was left. The dozen or so foundation establishment cultivators finally gathered outside the small village. A heavily injured foundation building cultivator and an aura refining cultivator. To them, it wasn't hard to find their whereabouts. However, when they found their target, they realized that it was not as easy as they had imagined. What awaited them was a yin-yang life-seizing formation. After a cultivator who rashly entered the formation was severely injured, everyone's gaze fell on the middle-aged Daoist who led the group. If Mo Tiange saw him, she would definitely recognize him as Martial Uncle Qingyu, the person who often gave lectures in the Dao Preaching Palace. In fact, this martial uncle's full name was Jiang Qingyu, and he was a member of the Jiang clan. Jiang Qingyu said nothing. This formation was called Yin-Yang Life Reaper. With such a vicious name, it was naturally not easy to break. Within this formation, Yin and Yang were reversed, and danger lurked everywhere. It was truly the most powerful formation a foundation establishment cultivator could create. He didn't expect this aura-refining disciple's elder would actually have such attainments in formations. Even in the school, this elder would be one of the best. Someone shouted, no matter what kind of formation it is, with so many foundation-building cultivators attacking together, we'll definitely be able to break it. Upon hearing this, Jiang Qingyu snorted coldly. Then with so many of us, we can only die with them. Everyone was surprised. Another person asked, it's that powerful? Jiang Qingyu said, this formation is actually a simplified formation. Its original form is the Heaven and Earth Life-Seizing Formation. I don't need to tell you what the Heaven and Earth Life-Seizing Formation is, right? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They had naturally heard of the Heaven and Earth Life-Seizing Formation. This formation was one of the few great formations left behind from the distant past era. Only nascent soul cultivators and above could lay this formation, and it was famous for its fierceness. Some cultivation groups in Kunwu used this formation as their great mountain-protecting formation. Among them, the most famous and complete one was the one used by Xianxia School. Reportedly, demonic beasts from the forest south of Kunwu came out in full force, catching all the cultivation groups in Kunwu off guard. Relying on this formation, Xianxia School barely suffered any casualties and even killed tens of thousands of demonic beasts. Since it was a simplified formation of the Heaven and Earth Life-Seizing Formation, Even if its power was only 1/10,000th, it would still be difficult to deal with. But it's not like there's no other way, Jiang Qingyu said while stroking his beard. Senior Martial Brother Jiang, quickly tell us. The branch master is still waiting for us to report. Jiang Qingyu stared at the dilapidated houses and muttered. It's very simple. Although this formation is powerful, it also consumes a lot of spiritual aura. We'll use our spiritual beasts to break the formation and let it activate a few more times. Presumably, the other side's spirit stones won't last long. There were many demonic beasts in the forest south of Kunwu. Many foundation-building cultivators like them raised spiritual beasts, but good spiritual beasts were hard to find and hard to raise. Because of this, everyone was very hesitant when they heard Jiang Qingyu's suggestion. Unexpectedly, no one responded. Jiang Qingyu could guess what everyone was thinking just by looking at their expressions. He said with a cold, since no one is willing, we'll just wait. We'll wait until they run out of spirit stones or until the branch master personally comes. Those two people will naturally be captured. Although everyone was hesitant for a moment, no one took out their spiritual beasts. Jiang Qingyu didn't say much and just looked for a place to sit and rest. In fact, not to mention others, he himself was also reluctant. In any case, those two people couldn't run away, so why should he sacrifice the spiritual beasts he raised painstakingly? Under Jiang Qingyu's lead, the cultivators from Xixia sect's Mount Yunwu branch found a place to sit and meditate, waiting for the yin-yang life-taking formation to run out of spirit stones. While they were waiting, someone approached Jiang Qingyu and asked, Senior Martial Brother Jiang, who was that aura-refining disciple? He had such a powerful elder, but he still dared to kill Jiang clan's young master. His guts were too big. Jiang Qingyu opened his eyes and said lazily, the branch master also wants to know the answer to this question. Although his own disciple was also killed, that disciple really didn't live up to his expectations, so he didn't feel sorry for him at all. Seeing that he was so impatient, that person let out a hollow laugh and didn't say anything else. However, someone else took over the conversation. On the way, I met several aura-refining disciples who followed Junior Martial Brother Wei to search. They said that Yi Xiaotian was actually a woman. What? His words attracted the attention of several people around him. Someone said, so you're saying that she disguised herself as a man and sneaked into our Yunwu sect? The person who spoke earlier coughed and reminded him, Junior Martial Brother Zhao, we're now in Mount Yunwu's branch. That person realized he made a slip of the tongue, so he hastily said, right. She sneaked into our Mount Yunwu's branch. Could it be that she harbors malicious intentions? That's hard to say. Even if she harbors malicious intentions, what can an aura-refining disciple do? Besides, this Yi Xiaotian wasn't conspicuous in our Mount Yunwu's branch, right? Junior Martial Brother Zhao said, conspicuous? She seems to be only 20 years old right now. She's already in the 10th layer of the aura-refining realm, and she even obtained a foundation-building pill. She's really not inferior to elite disciples. Be that as it may, the disciples who entered the sect through the Immortal's assembly are already comparable to elite disciples, so they can't be considered outstanding. That's true. However, this aura-refining disciple has always been inconspicuous. Why did she suddenly kill young Master Jiang? Once this question was asked, several people became silent. Jiang Qingyu sneered. What else could it be? The aura-refining disciples around Yi Xiaotian can prove that it was my disappointing disciple who called her out. Moreover, the place where she was killed is a place where nobody comes or goes. Since this Yi Xiaotian is a woman, do I even need to say the reason? Everyone present was silent. Although they had some guesses, they didn't dare to say it out loud. Jiang Qingyu was a member of Jiang clan, a junior of the branch master, and an elder of the murdered young Master Jiang. He could say it out loud, but they couldn't. There was silence. Everyone no longer said anything. Those who were resting rested, and those who were meditating meditated. After a long time, Jiang Qingyu suddenly raised his head. The expressions of the other foundation-building cultivators also changed greatly. A flight light appeared on the horizon. Its momentum was so strong that it was definitely a core formation senior. They originally thought it was just a core formation senior passing by, but unexpectedly, the flight light gradually descended as if it was coming towards them. More than 10 foundation-building cultivators stood up one after another. They looked at each other with grave expressions. They were all thinking that this flight light was red, so it wasn't the branch master's flight light. Who else could it be? The answer was soon revealed. The flight light descended and a young man landed in front of them. Jiang Qingyu frowned even more. This person's clothes are obviously the clothes of an aura-refining disciple of Yunwu sect, but why does he have the momentum of a core formation cultivator? However, this thought only flashed in his mind because the young man was already looking at them. His eyes were ice-cold. Jiang Qingyu and the others looked at each other and finally saluted him. "Greetings, senior." The young man accepted their salutes, but he didn't look at them. Instead, he stared at the formation outside the dilapidated house and muttered to himself, "Yinyang life-taking formation. I really didn't expect to see it here. This Yi Jiang is worthy of being Yi Hai's twin brother. He really has some skills." As he spoke, someone among the foundation-building cultivators cried out in surprise. "You're not that." The young man turned around and stared coldly at the person who spoke. Jiang Qingyu knew his fellow disciple had offended the core formation senior in front of him, so he hastily said, "Senior, please forgive us. We're disciples of Mount Yunwu of Xianxia sect. May I ask who you are?" The young man snorted but didn't answer. He just stared at the person who spoke first. "Martial Uncle Su, it seems you've recognized me." Everyone shifted their gazes towards a cultivator in his 40s. Junior Martial Brother Zhao asked in a low voice. "Senior Martial Brother Su, this senior is?" Martial Uncle Su looked at the young man not far from them. Seeing that he didn't intend to stop them, he answered in a low voice, "I once saw this senior in Junior Martial Brother Luo's concocting room. But at that time, he was only an ordinary aura-refining disciple." Everyone's expressions changed one after another. Judging from his aura, this senior was indeed a core formation cultivator. If what Senior Martial Brother Su said was correct, then this person had disguised himself as an aura-refining disciple and was hiding in Yunwu sect. What could make a core formation cultivator plot against him? In the end, it was still Jiang Qingyu who stepped forward. He said respectfully, "Senior, may I know why you've come? What advice do you have for us?" "Advice?" The young man chuckled. He didn't bother being polite and said faintly, "I want the two people inside." Jiang Qingyu was startled. "Senior, there's a trader of Mount Yunwu here, and the branch master personally gave the order." What? You don't want to?" The young man flicked his sleeve, causing a wave of spiritual aura pressure to rush towards them. How could they possibly withstand the spiritual aura pressure of a core formation cultivator? Some of them immediately took several steps back, their complexions turning pale. The young man said coldly, "I originally didn't need your consent, but I wanted to inform you. Since we've been fellow disciples for several years, I won't take your lives today." Scram. Chapter 91. Mo Tiange knew there were many foundation-building cultivators guarding outside, but she was too lazy to care about them. Even if she did, what could she do? How could an aura-refining disciple fight against so many foundation-building cultivators? In any case, without reinforcements, she and second uncle would die sooner or later. A loud rumble came from outside. Mo Tiange regained her composure and took out her greenwood sword. She was determined to go to the underworld with uncle and nephew so that she wouldn't fall into their hands and suffer another round of torture. But when she swung her sword, her hand suddenly went numb. She couldn't hold the sword anymore and it fell to the ground. Then she heard a familiar voice. "What are you doing?" Mo Tiange looked up and was stunned. "You," Qin Shi, who just stepped through the door, frowned slightly. "Do you want to commit suicide?" Mo Tiange stared at him in disbelief. "Senior Martial Brother Qin?" Qin Shi didn't say anything. He walked towards Yi Jiang, held his wrist, and injected his spiritual aura to examine his injury. His brows wrinkled. He then took out a jade box from his Qiankuan bag and opened it. Inside was a verdant spiritual plant. He plucked one of the leaves and stuffed it into Yi Jiang's mouth. Then he made a hand seal, sending a fiery light into Yi Jiang's body along with the leaf. His movements were very fast. It wasn't until he was done that Mo Tiange finally reacted. Senior Martial Brother Qin? Why you here? What did you give second uncle to eat? Qin Shi, who was still injecting spiritual aura into Yi Jiang, looked up and glanced at her. Don't worry. This is a temporary way to prolong his life. Your second uncle's injuries are too serious, so I can only keep him awake for a while. Mo Tiange didn't know what to say. The current situation was completely beyond her expectations. She had a lot of questions in her mind, but she couldn't ask them. Moreover, she felt that Qin Shi seemed different from before. It was as if she was very small in front of him. That means, Senior Martial Brother Qin, did you succeed in building your foundation? Qin Shi didn't answer. He was still concentrating on injecting spiritual aura into Yi Jiang. Judging from his behavior, it didn't seem like he wanted to harm second uncle. Mo Tiange thought about it and rushed to the door, only to see that there was no one there. She was very surprised. Even if he succeeded in building his foundation, how could he fight against more than a dozen foundation-building cultivators? Moreover, how did he get here? Mo Tiange felt her mind was in a mess. What's going on? Before he could ask, Yi Jiang groaned and seemed to have woken up. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange hastily rushed back. Second uncle. Yi Jiang opened his eyes with difficulty. When he saw the scene in front of him, he finally fixed his gaze on Qin Shi. You're Qin, she said gently. My surname is Qin. Yi Jiang was startled. In an instant, his eyes were filled with ecstasy. You are Qin, she showed a faint smile and said, I'm from Qin clan. I just happened to receive the news and rushed over. Upon hearing Qin Shi's confirmation, Yi Jiang actually calmed down. He closed his eyes, gasped for breath, and grabbed Qin Shi's hand. Finally made it, Qin Shi raised his hand to stop him. Don't get excited. I can't cure your injury. Right now, I can only give you the final radiance of a setting sun. If there's anything you want to say, please tell me as soon as possible. These words caused Yi Jiang's eyes to dim for a moment, but he quickly revealed a smile. He already knew he wouldn't be able to live. This time, Xiang could be saved. Second uncle. Although she knew second uncle didn't have long to live, watching him die still made her heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. Mo Tiange raised her head, stared at Qin Shi, and said anxiously, Senior Martial Brother Qin, you have a way, don't you? Can you let my second uncle live? Yi Jiang stretched out his hand to stop her. He said with a smile, don't be sad. There'll be a day like this. How could Mo Tiange not know she was being unreasonable? But she really couldn't. Yi Jiang sighed softly and said, Xiang, you go outside first. Wait a moment, then come back in. Mo Tiange wiped the tears on her face. She didn't understand. Second uncle, be obedient. Yi Jiang stared at her with a determined gaze. Just for a moment, while she was hesitating, Qin Shi said, Junior Martial Brother Yi, I'll be here. You can rest assured. Mo Tiange looked back and forth between the two of them. In the end, under second uncle's insistence, she nodded. Second uncle must have his reasons. She thought she'd better listen to second uncle. In the future, she might not have another chance. Mo Tiange walked out of the room. When Qin Shi saw Yi Jiang's expression, he immediately understood. With a wave of his hand, a soundproof barrier appeared around the two of them. He said, Fellow Daoist Yi, if you have something to say, just say it. Yi Jiang stared at the young man in his early 20s in front of him. He seemed to be examining him. I don't dare to call senior. Fellow Daoist. I think seniors to be Master Daoist Shoujing, right? Qin Shi lowered his gaze and asked calmly, How did you know? Yi Jiang took a deep breath, but he still smiled. Although my cultivation level isn't inferior to seniors, I have some experience. Senior suppressed your cultivation level to the foundation building realm, but your technique is actually something only core formation seniors can do. Seeing how difficult it was for him to speak, Xianxia once again transferred a bit of spiritual aura into Yi Jiang's meridians. He said, "Your brother is my friend in times of adversity. Since you're his younger brother, you don't need to call me senior." Upon hearing this, Yi Jiang slightly relaxed, but he still didn't change the way he addressed Xianxia. "So, senior doesn't mind what happened in the past?" Xianxia just smiled. "I can understand what you're thinking. Besides, why would I bicker with juniors over such trivial matters?" Yi Jiang finally felt relieved after receiving confirmation. He closed his eyes and gasped for breath for a while. When he calmed down, he once again said, "Please forgive junior's rudeness. Does senior have a good impression of Xiaoyan?" Once Yi Jiang said this, a hint of sharpness appeared in Xianxia's eyes, but he still said calmly, "What do you mean?" How could Yi Jiang not know Xianxia was slightly angry? However, he didn't panic. He still said slowly, "Senior, don't misunderstand. The good impression I'm talking about isn't love. It's just that senior doesn't want Xiaotian to know your identity. Junior can feel that senior treats Xiaoyan differently." After speaking for such a long time, Yi Jiang once again couldn't breathe. Xianxia once again poured spiritual aura into his body. He said faintly, but he didn't directly answer, "If you want to feel at ease, I'll agree. After today, I'll take her back to Xianxia school and protect her until she has the ability to protect herself." Yi Jiang showed a happy smile. In the end, he didn't gamble wrongly. "There's another matter. If Junior doesn't ask clearly, I won't feel at ease." As soon as he spoke, Xianxia understood. "You're talking about her constitution?" Yi Jiang nodded with difficulty. "Junior knows my request is a bit excessive. However, if I don't say it, I won't be able to die in peace." This time, Xianxia was silent for a long time before he finally said, "All right, I'll also agree to your request. If she doesn't agree, I won't force her." Yi Jiang shook his head and said, Junior's request is that, when necessary, senior can give her a push." Xianxia was stunned. He didn't quite understand what Yi Jiang meant. Tiange was sitting outside the room, staring blankly at the sky. She couldn't hear the slightest sound inside the room, so it was obvious the room was soundproof. She was a bit surprised because she never expected Xianxia to be a disciple of Xianxia school. Moreover, from what he said, he seemed to be a junior disciple of Master Daoist Shoujing. But she also realized something in her heart. No wonder this senior martial brother Qin has such unusual treasures and has such an unusual demeanor in every aspect. Judging from his momentum, he seems to have built his foundation, right? It's really strange that he actually built his foundation in another cultivation group. Presumably, with his identity, he must be an elite disciple in Xianxia school. Besides, he also has core formation and nascent soul elders, so it should be quite easy for him to build his foundation. Could it be that this is a quirk of disciples of famous cultivation groups? She couldn't help but feel it was funny, but she couldn't laugh. She knew very well that second uncle was going to die. What should I do without second uncle? She asked herself, but she only felt her heart was empty. After a long time, Xianxia's voice finally came from inside the room. "Junior martial brother Yi, please come in." Tiange regained her senses from her meditation. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and hurriedly entered the room. "Second uncle." Yi Jiang was leaning against the wall. Xianxia was still pouring spiritual aura into his body, but his spirit was rapidly weakening. Even his eyes were almost unable to open. "Xiaotian." He stretched out his hand with difficulty. Tiange hastily grasped his hand and knelt in front of him. "Second uncle, I'm here." Yi Jiang showed a smile, but he still tried to stretch out his hand and stroked her head like he did when she was a child. This action, full of love, made Tiange blink her eyes, and tears started to fall down her cheeks. "Tiange, don't cry. Second uncle is leaving. You have to live well." Tears also flowed out of Yi Jiang's muddy eyes and flowed down his wrinkled face. He also felt that this was really an eternal parting. Shan's second uncle There are two things I can't let go of. Second uncle, tell me. I'll definitely listen to you. Okay, listen. First, after you form your gold core, go back to Yi clan in the secular world and see if there's anyone with spiritual roots. You don't have to rebuild Yi clan. You just have to give some help to the younger generation. Mo Tiange nodded repeatedly. I understand. I'll definitely go back to see. Yi Jiang nodded slightly and looked at her tenderly. Second uncle. Second uncle entrusted you to Daoist. Master Daoist Shoujing. In the future, you have to cherish yourself, understand? By the time he finished speaking, Yi Jiang's cheeks were already full of tears. If he could, he really wanted to see her by himself, but the heavens didn't allow it. Mo Tiange, who was kneeling in front of him, was also sobbing. She could only nod desperately. Yi Jiang's eyes started to lose focus. Even though she kept pouring spiritual aura into him, he still couldn't make him more spirited. He murmured, Big brother? I'm sorry, I'm going to see you. At this point, there was no more sound. Mo Tiange sat on her knees in a daze. Her tears kept falling, but she didn't make any sound. She vaguely felt as if she had returned to 13 years ago, to the day her mother passed away. That kind of inconsolable grief of losing her forever made her unable to say a single word. When her mother died, she once felt the sky was going to collapse. But later, the heavens gave her a second uncle. Second uncle loved her, spoiled her, and also strictly disciplined her. Although she only called him second uncle, in her heart, she respected him as if he was her father. Sometimes she also thought how good it would be if her father was still alive. But every time she thought about it, she would scold herself for being greedy. Second uncle had already given her everything he could, including his life. What else could she ask for? Having second uncle was enough. Second uncle still left, leaving her behind. It was as if the sky had collapsed once again. Junior Marshall Brother Yi. In the midst of her blurriness, someone shouted, Do you want to die? She opened her eyes in confusion, but she couldn't see clearly. She felt someone holding her shoulder and shaking her hard. Breathe! A force hit her back. She couldn't help but cough, and the sound of crying also leaked out. She laid her head on her lap and wailed like a child, letting her tears drown her. Although she had learned the law of immortality and was no longer weak, at this moment, she still felt that she was the little girl from 13 years ago. Second uncle said that losing was for growing up. But she'd rather not grow up. Someone sighed softly and pulled her up, letting her lean on his shoulder, but he didn't say anything. Chapter 92. Near evening, a man was sitting on the hillside looking at the sky. She leaned against the door of the dilapidated house and watched the man looking at the sky. The weather today was very good. The sky was clear and blue, with light clouds and a gentle breeze. If it was in the secular world, it would be a day for scholars to go for an outing. But cultivators rarely had this kind of interest. Whether it was sunny or thunderous, it was the same in their eyes. Therefore, he knew this man's attention wasn't on the scenery. But after watching for a long time, he sighed because he felt he might have accepted a big trouble. A cultivator with too many emotions. He didn't think she had any future, but since he already agreed, he couldn't go back on his word. In fact, Yi Jiang was right. He really thought highly of this child and thought she had the potential to become a high-level cultivator even though her aptitude wasn't good. For example, she could endure loneliness and wasn't afraid of hard cultivation. She wasn't greedy but had the heart to improve. She was smart and good at using tricks. Moreover, she didn't hesitate when she needed to be ruthless and could make quick decisions. If a cultivator had these qualities, they only lacked fated chances. But he actually found out she was addicted to emotions. Cultivation wasn't just about advancing one's cultivation level. One's heart had to be strong enough to grasp power. A cultivator who was addicted to emotions would have a hard time achieving great things. So he was a bit distressed now. How should he deal with this person? He felt it was a pity to indulge her, but he wasn't in the mood to teach her. Junior Marshall Brother Yi. Mo Tiange tilted her head and saw Qin Shi walking towards her. Senior Martial Brother Qin, what's the matter? Her voice was very calm, so calm that Qin Shi was surprised. He looked at her carefully and didn't see any abnormalities, so he said, "We should go." Mo Tiange nodded, stood up, and dusted off her sleeves. Qin Shi didn't move but asked again, "Are you really okay?" Mo Tiange turned to look at the sunset and smiled slightly. "I'm fine." She didn't look like she was sad. Qin Shi thought about it. Except for that day, she really hadn't cried again, so she probably wasn't forcing herself. He said, "Do you have anything else to prepare?" Mo Tiange was silent for a while. She seemed to be thinking about a lot of things, but in the end, she just sighed softly and said, "It's nothing. I don't need them. Just leave them." This sentence seemed to have some hidden meaning. Qin Shi suddenly felt that his worries just now were a bit unnecessary. This woman was more rational than he imagined. He couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure you can let it go?" Mo Tiange smiled. This time, her smile wasn't forced at all. After laughing, she said softly, "Second uncle said that losing is to grow up. Similarly, I feel that experience is to make oneself stronger." Experiences for the sake of becoming stronger. Qin Shi muttered this sentence in his heart. He felt he didn't need to say anything else. Mo Tiange indeed felt very calm. 13 years ago, she was still a child. She could walk out of the sorrow of losing her mother, and she would not be defeated now. Second uncle had always told her that she had to have a strong heart in order to achieve her lofty goals. Now that second uncle had left, how could she disappoint him? She calmly told herself that she had to live well and cultivate well, not for second uncle, but for herself. Although she had no intention of embarking on the path of cultivation in the beginning, cultivation was still something that made her feel happy. Learning a spell, making a realm breakthrough, becoming stronger, defeating enemies, all of these things made her feel happy. In that case, she'd just keep walking like this. She'd do what she liked and resolutely walk down this path. She followed Qin Shi and stepped onto the flying sword. The two of them rode the wind on their swords and set foot on the road. This flying sword was another magic weapon. Mo Tiange no longer felt jealous or envious. Since this senior martial brother Qin had a great background, it was normal for him to have a lot of treasures. However, after flying for a while, Mo Tiange felt a bit strange. "Senior martial brother Qin, why are we going east?" East was the way back to Mount Yunwu. Qin Shi glanced at her, but he was still riding the flying sword. He answered, "There are some things I need to deal with." Oh, maybe he still has some unfinished business. As Mo Tiange thought about this, she was a bit worried. That day, when more than a dozen foundation-building cultivators retreated, Qin Shi spoke vaguely, so she didn't know the inside story. However, even if he could make more than a dozen foundation-building cultivators retreat, could he do the same to core formation cultivators from Mount Yunwu? She clearly understood that she'd thoroughly offended Branch Master Jiang. Jiang Chengxian wasn't only his direct descendant, but he was also his only bloodline. It was tantamount to her cutting off his bloodline. Besides, Yunwu sect now belonged to Xixia sect, and Xixia sect still had a nascent soul cultivator. Even if this senior martial brother Qin had an elder backing him, it was still too far away. Just as her mind was filled with worries, she suddenly heard Qin Shi say, "Junior martial brother Yi, what are you worried about?" Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and answered honestly, "I'm worried I'll be intercepted when I go back." Even though he was now in the foundation-building realm, he was still like an ant in front of core formation cultivators. She only needed to be worried about the elder behind him, so she only needed to restrain him. She still felt her life wasn't guaranteed. Qin Shi just smiled. "I won't. You can rest assured." Senior martial brother Qin, you're already in the foundation-building realm now, so it seems I shouldn't call you that anymore. According to convention, she should have called him martial uncle after she made a realm breakthrough. Qin Shi shook his head and said, "I just entered closed-door meditation one step ahead of you. You're already well-equipped now, so building your foundation is only a matter of time. There's no need to be so troublesome." Nevertheless, Tiange didn't have the same confidence as him. She said with disappointment and frustration, "My second uncle was able to build his foundation because my father used medicinal pills to help him." Second uncle said he used no less than 5 foundation building pills to build his foundation. My aptitude isn't as good as second uncle's, so building my foundation, I'm afraid it won't be something that can be done in 1 or 2 years. In fact, she was already prepared to spend 10 to 20 years. If she still couldn't build her foundation, she would continue to fight for foundation building pills until she succeeded. Rest assured, when you arrive at Xianxia School, you'll naturally have the guidance of the school's elders. Building your foundation isn't that difficult. Besides, we've been in the same school for 3 years, so we've already gotten used to calling each other that. There's no need to change it. Since he said that, Tiange felt too embarrassed to refuse, so she didn't say anything more. However, she said with some hesitation, "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, actually. Yi Xiaotian isn't my real name." Qin, she smiled and said, "I know. You took your mother's surname, Mo, and your name is Tiange. Now, you don't need to hide your name anymore. When you arrive at Xianxia School, you can use your original name again. But I'm already used to calling you that, so I don't want to change it." Qin, she always kept his distance from other people and rarely showed such a casual and lively side. Tiange couldn't help but smile. "Then I'll follow Senior Marshal Brother Qin's wishes." At this time, the master of Mount Yunwu, whom Tiange was worried about, wasn't in Mount Yunwu. The stone door of the Immortal's cave opened, and a young girl with a foundation building cultivation level came out. She bowed to Branch Master Jiang, who was waiting on the side, and said, "Grandmaster invites Branch Master Jiang in." Branch Master Jiang, who was waiting impatiently, was overjoyed when he heard what she said. He politely bowed to the girl, then followed her into the Immortal's cave. A skinny Daoist was sitting on a praying mat in the center of the Immortal's cave. When Branch Master Jiang saw this person, he immediately bowed and saluted him. "Greetings, Grand Supreme Elder." After a long time, the Daoist finally uttered an N and opened his eyes. So, Branch Master Jiang respectfully saluted him, then sat down. "Speak. What's the matter?" This Daoist's attitude was somewhat indifferent, but Branch Master Jiang didn't dare to show the slightest bit of disrespect because this seemingly unremarkable Daoist was actually a nascent soul cultivator. "Grand Supreme Elder, it's about that previous matter. Disciple wants to ask you to make a decision." After Branch Master Jiang finished speaking, he stared anxiously at the Daoist in front of him, but the Daoist didn't even spare him a glance. The Daoist took the spiritual tea a serving disciple offered him and slowly sipped it for a while before he said, "Make a decision? How do you want me to make a decision? Avenge your good-for-nothing great-grandson? You might as well be reborn." Although this Daoist looked amiable, his words were harsh, making Branch Master Jiang's face turn red. He naturally knew his great-grandson was good for nothing, but no matter how good for nothing he was still his bloodline. "Grand Supreme Elder," Branch Master Jiang said humbly, "Disciple doesn't ask you to take action. I only ask you to allow me to take revenge. Disciple only has this one great-grandson. Even if he did 1,000 things wrong, it's still my family's business. How can I let an outsider kill him?" Unfortunately, his words didn't move the Daoist. The Grand Supreme Elder only snorted softly. "It seems you're still not clear-headed. For us cultivators, what's the big deal about the death of a descendant? This kind of descendant who only knows how to stir up trouble and doesn't have the slightest ability should just die. Go back. Don't mention this matter again in the future." "Grand Supreme Elder." Seeing that Branch Master Jiang didn't listen, the Daoist's eyes revealed a fierce look. "What? Are you complaining that I didn't help you?" Branch Master Jiang promptly lowered his head but didn't refute. The Daoist snorted and said, "Fine, I'll explain it to you clearly. This Qin Shoujing you mentioned isn't an ordinary core formation cultivator. He has a nascent soul elder behind him." Upon hearing those words, Branch Master Jiang was shocked. "Supreme Elder, this person actually has such a background?" The Daoist snorted. "Otherwise, why do you think he dared to act presumptuously in East Kunwu, which is thousands of miles away? Let me tell you, Behind Qin Shoujing is that old guy, Qin Jinghe. You don't understand Qin Jinghe, but I do. He's extremely protective of his people and very bloodthirsty. Usually, he won't attack casually because of Xianxia school's rules, but if you hurt his people, it's not impossible for him to come from thousands of miles away and start a massacre. I'm only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. I can't defeat him, so you'd better save your worries. Grand Supreme Elder, aren't nascent soul cultivators not allowed to kill indiscriminately? That's because your knowledge is shallow. The Daoist closed his eyes and said slowly, nascent soul cultivators don't kill indiscriminately because they want to avoid inner demons appearing and stagnating in their cultivation. But if they have a reason, they can certainly attack. Branch Master Jiang lowered his head in silence. That being the case, he actually couldn't do anything to that little aura-refining disciple. The Daoist went on to say, also, you'd better go back and investigate what Qin Shoujing is doing in your Mount Yunwu. Xianxia School is one of the biggest cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole. They have everything they want, but they just had to sneak into a small cultivation group and even stayed for 3 years. I'm afraid they're plotting something big. Chapter 93. By the time they landed on the boundary of Mount Yunwu, it was already nighttime. Tienge looked at the familiar scenery and was a bit hesitant, but when she thought of Second Uncle, she straightened her back. Second Uncle was indirectly forced to die by them, and Mount Yunwu had a great hatred for her. How could she be weak and afraid when she had a great hatred? But the strange thing was that after Qin she brought her down, no one came to ask about it. The two of them just swaggered into the mountain gate. After walking for a while, Tienge asked in confusion, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, aren't we going to 10,000 Laws Pavilion? They weren't going to the South Peak or the North Peak. This path only led to 10,000 Laws Pavilion and had no other destination. Qin she didn't deny it and just made a gesture to keep quiet. Tienge didn't say much and followed him. When they arrived at the entrance of 10,000 Laws Pavilion, they used their identity tablets to open the formation and entered the cave. Tienge walked behind Qin Shi. She didn't know what Qin Shi did, but when she entered, she saw that all the disciples guarding 10,000 Laws Pavilion were asleep. Qin Shi led her to the entrance of the cave in the middle. He made several complicated hand seals with his hands and hit the stone door with his spiritual aura. The stone door opened silently. Seeing her surprised expression, Qin Shi smiled. I was lucky enough to come here with a core formation grandmaster, so I memorized it. He said it casually, but Tienge knew this required eyesight and comprehension. Making hand seals wasn't just a gesture, it also required the corresponding spiritual aura circulation. Because of this, pill recipes were so expensive. Concocting some medicinal pills required specific hand seals, and people had to slowly figure them out to be able to use them freely. She knew she didn't have this kind of ability. After seeing it once, she only remembered a little bit and had no clue about the circulation of spiritual aura. This was also the reason why she didn't dabble in pill concocting or tool refining and wasn't familiar with hand seals. Qin Shi took a talisman and handed it to her. Put an invisibility talisman on it to avoid triggering the restriction. Tienge took it, feeling a bit complicated. Invisibility talismans were priceless. She only had one, and Second Uncle only managed to find it after searching for a long time. It was much more precious than many high-level talismans. She had seen the talisman paper used to draw this talisman before, so she was sure Qin Shi drew it himself. It had only been 2 years since Qin Shi started learning how to draw talismans. In just 2 short years, he was actually able to draw invisibility talismans. Tienge realized that she definitely didn't have this kind of talent, so she couldn't help but feel dispirited. There were too many people who were more talented than her. It really wasn't easy for her to have some achievements. This cave was slightly smaller than the ones aura-refining disciples could enter, and there weren't many things inside. Most of them were grotesquely shaped objects. On the contrary, there weren't many jade slips, and there was only one bookshelf filled with books. Furthermore, there was also a restriction placed on top of it. Mo Tiange was apprehensive about these restrictions, so she just looked at them and didn't dare to make a move. Qin Shi, on the other hand, didn't care at all. He rummaged around and threw whatever he liked into his Qiankuan bag. Unexpectedly, none of the restrictions were triggered. Upon seeing his behavior, Mo Tiange felt it was absurd. Did this senior martial brother Qin sneak into Yunwu sect just to be a robber? Before long, Qin Shi stopped. Aside from the things he put away, there were still several things in his hand. He directly threw them to her and said, "This place is only accessible to core formation cultivators and above. These things might be useful to you, so take them." Mo Tiange took them and silently put them into her Qiankuan bag. In any case, this was his good intention, so there was no need for her to refuse. After erasing all kinds of traces, the two of them quietly left 10,000 Laws Pavilion. As for those disciples guarding 10,000 Laws Pavilion, they were in a trance for a moment. They never expected that while they were in a trance, the library cave that could only be opened by core formation cultivators in the sect was stolen. Without mentioning these disciples guarding the cave, Qin Shi took Mo Tiange and continued to walk on the unknown path. Mo Tiange only knew this path led to the North Peak. However, judging from Qin Shi's familiar appearance, he should have taken this path often. After walking for a while, the two of them finally entered the North Peak. Facing the North Peak's formation within a formation, Qin Shi only took out an identity tablet and safely led her inside. After several turns, when a building finally appeared in front of them, Mo Tiange couldn't tell north from south anymore. Qin Shi still quietly broke the restriction and led her into a garden. Once they entered, their nostrils were filled with the fragrance of medicinal herbs and their bodies were overflowing with spiritual aura. As it turned out, this place was actually a medicinal garden. Qin Shi still asked her to stand on the side, but this time, he didn't look around. Instead, he picked several spiritual fruits or spiritual plants with a specific target before he took her out of this medicinal garden. Mo Tiange finally understood. This senior martial brother Qin was simply here to steal something in passing. He wasn't familiar with 10,000 Laws Pavilion, but he was familiar with this medicinal garden. Several years ago, he received the appreciation of a foundation-building cultivator in the North Peak and got a job in the concocting room. He must have taken a liking to these spiritual plants long ago and seized the opportunity to steal them. This made her very speechless. The image of the cold but gentlemanly senior martial brother Qin had completely collapsed. After picking the spiritual plants, Mo Tiange silently followed him and continued walking, wondering which unlucky places he had taken a liking to. A quarter of an hour later, she was dumbfounded. Although she was mentally prepared, she still didn't expect that the next place would be Guiyuan Hall. What kind of place was Guiyuan Hall? It was the residence of Yunwu sect's sect head. Every generation of sect heads lived in Guiyuan Hall when they were in power. The last sect head, Fang Dingyue, was killed in Xixia sect, so Branch Master Jiang lived here now. She never expected Qin Shi would be so bold. Now, she could only brace herself and quietly follow him into Guiyuan Hall. Inside Guiyuan Hall, there were restrictions everywhere. She didn't know how he did it, but as they walked, these restrictions seemed to exist in name only. They weren't triggered at all. Moreover, they weren't discovered by the disciples guarding the hall. She knew Qin Shi must have done something, but these methods were usually secret techniques, so she didn't ask him about it. The two of them walked back and forth in Guiyuan Hall, avoiding several groups of disciples guarding the hall. In the end, they unexpectedly entered a stone passage through a restriction. Even if Mo Tiange didn't know much about Guiyuan Hall, she knew this kind of protection was definitely an important place. However, she didn't think about it anymore. Although Qin Shi was bold and reckless, he was also capable. She couldn't see what kind of restriction it was, but it was easily solved by him. The stone passage behind the restriction was winding for an unknown length. The two of them walked for a long time, but they still didn't reach the end. Occasionally, they came across one or two stone rooms with some treasures inside, but Qin Shi didn't even spare them a glance. Mo Tiange suddenly realized that he must be going for a certain treasure. These things weren't his goal. After walking for a while, they finally arrived in front of a stone room. Xianxia suddenly raised his hand to stop her. Then he took out a peach branch from his Jiankuan bag. The green leaves on the peach branch looked like they were new, and the peach blossoms looked like they had just been plucked from the tree. He muttered a few words, then waved his hand. The peach branch stood on the ground, emitting a burst of fragrance. Then, a barrier slowly appeared around the two of them. "Senior Martial Brother Qin?" Emotienga called out in a low voice. Xianxia just raised his index finger, signaling her not to speak. The two of them stood in the passageway of the stone room for a while. Then, Emotienga heard voices coming from the stone room. "Senior Martial Brother Lin, what do you think of this 9 Dragons Cauldron?" This voice. It's Branch Master Jiang. Emotienga raised her head to look at Xianxia, hoping he could explain what he was doing. Branch Master Jiang was here, and there seemed to be another core formation cultivator. Were they courting death by squatting here? However, Xianxia just shook his head at her without saying anything. After a moment of silence, they heard another voice. This person said bluntly, "What do you want?" Branch Master Jiang let out a hollow laugh and said, "Senior Martial Brother Lin, you're now the branch master of Jindao School, and I'm the master of Mount Yunwu. We're in the same situation, so we should be more intimate." The other person snorted. This old Daoist doesn't dare to be mentioned in the same breath as Branch Master Jiang. You're the great hero of Xianxia sects merging with Mount Yunwu. I, Lin, am just an old Daoist who doesn't know how many years I have left to live. I'm afraid I'll shorten my lifespan if I get too close to you. His words were sarcastic. Emotienga felt that this voice and attitude seemed a bit familiar. Right? Wasn't the Daoist who led Jindao School's team during the foundation building pill trial the branch master of Jindao School? Emotienga also heard some gossip about this matter later. This Daoist Lin was the former head of Jindao School. Later, when his lifespan was about to end, he passed on the position of head to school head Jin. Unexpectedly, Jindao School suffered a great disaster due to the change in Xianxia sect, and school head Jin and several core formation cultivators died. Jindao School was really weak and couldn't compete with Xianxia sect, so the former head could only plead with Xianxia sect. Jindao School voluntarily joined Xianxia sect and asked them to stop the purge. Later, Xianxia sect felt that his reputation was high enough and his lifespan was about to end. Since he could buy people's hearts and wasn't afraid of any mishaps, Xianxia sect appointed him as the branch master of Jindao School. This retired former sect head could only stand in front of the storm again. This branch master Lin only became the branch master appointed by Xianxia sect for the sake of the other disciples of Jindao School, so he naturally looked down on branch master Jiang, who relied on Xianxia sect and betrayed Yunwu sect. His words were also extremely harsh. However, because of his extremely high reputation, even Xianxia sect respected him very much, so branch master Jiang didn't dare to offend him. At this point, they obviously didn't see eye to eye. Sure enough, branch master Jiang only chuckled, then changed the topic. "I won't hide it from Senior Martial Brother Lin. Junior Martial Brother has encountered a difficult matter and wants to ask Senior Martial Brother Lin to help me." Branch Master Lin didn't seem surprised at all. "Is it about that great-grandson of yours who had ill intentions towards a female disciple of your school and lost his life?" "Yes, the person who killed my great-grandson was unfortunately rescued by someone. That person was..." When she heard this, Emotienga suddenly felt her head go numb and her body went limp. She gently propped her up against the stone wall and heard Branch Master Lin's voice coming from inside the stone room. "Branch Master Jiang, I can't accept this 9 Dragons Cauldron of yours." Branch Master Jiang hastily said, "Senior Martial Brother Lin, I'm not asking you to kill that person. I just want you to trap him so I can have a chance to take revenge." Branch Master Lin only snorted coldly. "There's no need to mention this matter again. Even if I have that ability, I won't do it. Do you think I don't know that there's a nascent soul cultivator behind this person? Senior Martial Brother Lin, Xianxia School is thousands of miles away. Branch Master Jiang." Branch Master Lin suddenly shouted fiercely, "You should take revenge on your own. Do you want to bring calamity upon my Jindao School? I can't accept this 9 Dragons Cauldron." We don't see eye to eye, so let's call it a day. There's no need to see us off. Not long after he finished speaking, the stone room's door was suddenly opened. An old Daoist angrily walked out, followed by Branch Master Jiang. He was angry but didn't dare to turn hostile. The two of them left as if they couldn't see Xianxia and Xianxia, who were stuck against the stone wall. However, before Branch Master Lin left, he seemed to cast a glance in their direction. After a while, Branch Master Jiang turned around with an angry expression on his face. However, when he stepped into the stone room, he discovered that a young man was already standing inside. With an aghast expression, he immediately took out his magic weapon and shouted, "Who are you?" The young man showed a faint smile but didn't answer. He leisurely took out a sword from his chinkuan bag and unsheathed it. The sword was completely golden, and flames were dancing on its blade. Its momentum was astonishing. 3 Yang Real Fire Sword. Chapter 94. When she woke up, Xianxia was a bit confused. She slowly recalled what happened before she fainted and jumped up in shock, looking around nervously. This seemed to be a room in an inn. The furniture was simple, the floor was gray, and the quilt had a slightly moldy smell. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you're awake?" Xianxia turned her head and looked in the direction of the voice. She was sitting at the table in the outer room. He seemed to be drawing talismans with his back to her and didn't look back. Seeing this scene, she felt a bit relieved. She looked so relaxed, which meant they should be fine. However, she was a bit confused. "Senior Marshal Brother Qin, were we discovered?" She put down the brush, burned the broken talisman paper, and answered, "No, I knocked you out." She was even more confused. He didn't explain. He put away the paper and brush on the table and said, "Since you're awake, let's go in a bit." Xianxia nodded in bewilderment. She thought that since he was able to escape from 2 core formation cultivators, he probably used some kind of secret technique, so it wasn't convenient for him to tell her. However, she always felt that she was very strange. He could always do things she thought were basically impossible, but his attitude was too calm. It made her want to doubt him, but she also felt that she was being too paranoid. Maybe it's because he has a high-level cultivator elder, so he has too many treasures? But she took out several things from his chinkuan bag and threw them to her. "I got these yesterday. Take them." Xianxia took them. They were soft armor and the jade ruler. These are the heaven and earth cloud silk armor and the land fleeing ruler. The former is a defensive item. When worn, it can withstand several attacks from cultivators in the same realm. As for the land-fleeing ruler, it's a good thing. If you use it to escape, you'll be hundreds of miles away. Xianxia was shocked. She knew how precious these 2 things were. Although they weren't magic weapons, they weren't far off. "Why are you giving them to me?" She said, "I don't need them, but I thought it would be a waste not to take them, so of course I'm giving them to you." But before she could say anything, she interrupted her. "No buts. You're usually very straightforward. Why are you acting like a little girl now?" Wasn't it because he knew her gender and didn't want to owe her a favor? However, she couldn't say this out loud. Otherwise, she would offend Xianxia. He had saved her when she was in danger, so it could be said that she owed him a favor. She still wanted to keep some distance, but if he knew, he would think that she didn't know what was good for her. "All right, I won't say anything unnecessary. Anyway, I owe you too much, 1 more won't make a difference," she smiled. "This is how Junior Marshal Brother Yi should be. Oh, I'll go out first. You can tidy up a bit and come out when you're done." "Okay, got it." A moment later, the 2 of them walked out of the inn. Xianxia discovered that they were still at the foot of Mount Yunwu. She thought to herself that this senior martial brother Qin really came from a prestigious family, and his courage was too big. Before he left, he turned around to look at Mount Yunwu. The north and south peaks towered into the clouds and were surrounded by lingering spiritual aura. Once upon a time, this was the place she had strived to enter, but now, she was desperately trying to escape. "Junior Brother Yi, is there anything you can't let go of?" Mo Tiange was silent for a while, then shook her head. It's not that I can't let go. I just want to remember those people I know. Unfortunately, it's not convenient to see them right now. Xianxia said, don't worry. Although senior martial brother Lu hasn't built his foundation yet, he's received the favor of a senior from the sect, so his future is bright. I heard that junior martial sister Murong's cultivation is also going very smoothly. She has the support of her clan, so presumably, she also has a high chance of building her foundation. Is that so? She murmured, but then she remembered Jiang Shanghong and wondered whether he had escaped or not. Forget it, forget it. Right now, she couldn't even take care of herself, so let's just leave it to fate. If we're fated, we'll definitely meet again in the future. Senior martial brother Qin, let's go. Several days later, two people landed in the small market square of Huanshan Dock. They were Mo Tiange and Xianxia. Huanshan Dock was located northeast of Mount Yunwu, so it wasn't on the way. However, Mo Tiange wanted to deal with some matters, so Xianxia agreed, so the two of them took a detour to this place. The two of them first went to the small shop Tianqiao opened. Sure enough, the door was closed. Just as Mo Tiange was about to push the door open, a person walked out of the small shop next door and shouted, Master Immortal, you can't enter. Mo Tiange turned around. It was Immortal dressed as a shop assistant. She frowned and asked, why? The shop assistant hastily saluted them and said with a respectful expression, Master Immortal, it's not that this lowly one doesn't want to let you in. It's that our Market Square's Steward's Hall has sealed this shop. Sealed? What did that mean? The shop assistant observed her expression and answered, yes. Master Immortal, you're not from here, right? Something happened to this shop, so it's been taken away by the Steward's Hall. It hasn't been rented out yet, so it's empty. Mo Tiange frowned and asked, what about the original owner of this shop? Upon hearing her question, the shop assistant sighed and said, to tell you the truth, the husband and wife who originally opened this shop are both dead. Mo Tiange already knew about this, so she just asked, what about their corpses? Her question was too direct, so the shop assistant was full of questions, but he didn't dare to say anything. He answered, this lowly one doesn't know. I only know it was handled by the Steward's Hall. Where's the Steward's Hall? Oh, you can go straight from here. You'll find the biggest room. Mo Tiange nodded, then took out a piece of gold and threw it to the shop assistant. The shop assistant only came out to answer a few questions, but he unexpectedly received such a big piece of gold. He immediately beamed with joy and repeatedly said, thank you, Master Immortal. Thank you, Master Immortal. The two of them turned around and walked for a short distance before they successfully found the Steward's Hall. Fellow Daoists, is there something you need? There was only a second layer aura refining cultivator guarding the Steward's Hall. He was drinking wine while asking them questions. His attitude was extremely impatient. Mo Tiange frowned when she sensed the smell of alcohol coming from the man's body. Is this the Steward's Hall? The cultivator burped and looked at them from the corner of his eyes. However, he didn't correct his attitude because of their cultivation levels. He pointed the wine bottle outside the door with his hand and said with his eyes closed, if you don't know, then come back after you've seen clearly. Mo Tiange was a bit annoyed, but she was still patient. Just as she was about to ask, she took a step forward, threw a handful of spirit stones on the table and said coldly, we have something to ask you. Upon seeing the spirit stones on the table, the man's eyes immediately lit up. When he finished speaking, his attitude immediately changed. Not only did he put down the wine bottle, but he also stood up and politely saluted them. What do you want to ask? I'll definitely tell you everything I know. Mo Tiange was speechless upon seeing this man's completely different attitude. This manager's Market Square's eyes were really opened only when he saw money. He clearly knew their cultivation levels were much higher than his, but he was indifferent to them. Now that he saw money, he immediately became polite. Mo Tiange directly asked, a few days ago, a husband and wife died in your Market Square. May I ask where their bodies are? Upon hearing her question, the man pondered for a moment, then answered, fellow Daoist, you're talking about the one surnamed Meng, right? Mo Tiange nodded. How did you deal with their funeral? About that? The man raised his eyes and carefully sized her up. May I ask how fellow Daoist is related to them? Relatives. Upon hearing Imo Tianga's answer, the man cast a somewhat guilty glance at her and said, Fellow Daoist, we never heard that brat surnamed Meng had any relatives. Imo Tianga frowned and said bluntly, Sir, you only need to tell us where their bodies are. The cultivator looked at the spirit stones on the table, then finally answered. Fellow Daoist, we really didn't know they had relatives, so we burned them according to our usual practice and buried their ashes in the back of the mountain. Imo Tianga's heart sank. So you're saying the bodies are gone? Not really. Upon seeing her cold expression, the man answered honestly, You can still find them if you want, but they're all buried in the ground, so you can't tell which part is the soil and which part is the ashes. Fellow Daoist? Imo Tianga took a deep breath, then turned around and walked away. She didn't want to stay here any longer and think about killing this man with her sword. Qin, she caught up to her and called out, Junior Martial Brother Yi. Imo Tianga paused for a moment to calm her anger. She just wanted to deal with Tianxiao's funeral and bring her husband's ashes back to Imo family's village if she had a chance in the future. Junior Martial Brother Yi, who are you looking for in the end? Imo Tianga was silent for a while, then answered, My cousin. We grew up together when we were kids and she took care of me the most. Oh, you seem to have known about them. Imo Tianga smiled bitterly. Of course I knew. They were implicated by me. Implicated? Imo Tianga nodded and lowered her head with a gloomy expression. If she hadn't taken the pill recipe for the constitution-enhancing pill, Jiang Chengxian wouldn't have noticed her. If she hadn't been too careless and was discovered in Hu clan, Jiang Chengxian wouldn't have recognized her and Tianxiao wouldn't have had her soul searched. It was all because of her that Tianxiao lost her life. Upon seeing her expression, Qin, she didn't ask again. Instead, he sighed and said, Do you feel very guilty? Upon hearing this question, Imo Tianga was at a loss for a while before she finally nodded and said softly, Yes. If they hadn't run into me, they would be fine. If you found their ashes, would you feel better? After people die, where their ashes are buried is the same, right? Even if there's a tombstone, it'll only comfort the living. Even if you brought their ashes back, what difference would it make to them? Imo Tianga was speechless. Qin, she looked at her and said faintly, Don't forget, you're a cultivator. Although his voice was flat and didn't contain the slightest hint of blame, Imo Tianga understood the warning in his words. Cultivators shouldn't be restricted by external objects and shouldn't be obsessed with formality. If they couldn't even see through this, how could they talk about cultivating? Cultivators cultivated their hearts. If they couldn't even get past external objects, how could they advance their cultivation level? She understood all these principles, but when we were in Yunwu sect, I originally thought you were a free and easy person who was very firm on the path of cultivation. But now I know you can't even see through one's state of mind. Junior Martial Brother Yi, you have to know that if you continue like this, you can only build your foundation at most. As for forming your gold core, you won't have any hope. Imo Tianga's heart trembled. Right? Second uncle just passed away. How could I make a mistake again? Some things have already happened. Guilt and regret are useless. She closed her eyes and said sincerely, Senior Martial Brother Qin, thank you. Chapter 95. Standing on the flying sword, Imo Tianga looked down at the ground. The mountain peaks gathered together, the clouds billowed furiously, and the mountains stood towering. This was West Kunwa's Mount Taikong, the main gate of Xianxing School. If she hadn't been to Tiandao sect and seen Mount Yuheng and Demonic Mountain, she would have been shocked by the scenery under her feet. Compared to such a lofty and rich spiritual aura, Mount Yunwu was simply not worth mentioning. Even Zixia sect, which she once exclaimed in admiration, now seemed to be petty. Mount Taikong was several thousand feet high. Although it wasn't as high as Demonic Mountain, it was one of the rarest peaks she'd seen along the way. Its main peak was the highest, and it was surrounded by 6 other peaks of similar height. Countless roof tiles and eaves were hidden in the forest, and there were also hundreds of disciples neatly lined up in the square, learning martial arts. Upon noticing the direction in which she was staring, Xianxia explained, "Although Xianxia School is a Dao school, we also have many kinds of cultivation techniques. These disciples are from sword cultivation groups and are sword cultivators, so they learn martial arts just like the secular world. It looks really spectacular. Looking from a distance, these cultivators in blue and white robes brandished their swords together. The sword aura was really crisscrossing, elegant and pleasing to the eye. Sensing someone approaching, she looked up and saw a group of 7 or 8 cultivators coming on their swords. The leader was a foundation-building cultivator who seemed to be in charge of mountain patrol. Upon seeing them, the group of cultivators flew over but only saluted Xianxia from afar. After they left, Xianxia said, "All right, from now on, you're a disciple of Xianxia School. I'll take you in now. Let's go." The flying sword went down towards one of the peaks. This is Clear Spring Peak. Xianxia School has 6 peaks. The disciples of each peak usually cultivate on the side peaks and go to the main peak to listen to Dao. You only need to memorize the general terrain of Clear Spring Peak. We only go to the main peak occasionally. After Xianxia finished speaking, the two of them landed in front of a main hall. She was still looking around when a female cultivator came out of the main hall. As soon as she saw them, she looked pleasantly surprised and was about to call out, "Fengshu, come here." The female cultivator swallowed the words she was about to say back into her stomach. Full of questions, she walked over and bowed. Xianxia first said to Immortal, "This is our Clear Spring Peak supervising disciple and also martial uncle Xuanin's inner disciple, Luo Fengshu." Right after he said that, he said to Luo Fengshu, "It's been 3 years, but you still haven't built your foundation?" Upon seeing his expression, Luo Fengshu blinked her eyes, then very cleverly called out, "Martial uncle?" Xianxia showed a faint smile and said, "Yes, now you have to call me martial uncle." "Oh." Luo Fengshu's eyes wandered back and forth. She then said with a smile, "Martial uncle, why did it take you so long to come back? Grandmaster misses you very much." Xianxia didn't answer. Instead, he pointed at Immortal and said, "This is the junior martial sister who just entered the school. Take her to the register first. Later, we'll make arrangements." Luo Fengshu looked at Immortal with doubt on her face. In the end, she just smiled and said, "Junior martial sister, what's your name?" This was the first time someone called her junior martial sister, and Luo Fengshu happened to be wearing men's clothes. For a moment, Immortal didn't know how to greet her. In the end, she could only answer first. "Senior martial sister Luo, my name is Immortal." "Tiange?" Luo Fengshu called her name. She immediately pulled Immortal's hand affectionately and said, "Don't call me senior martial sister. Everyone calls me by my name. You can also call me Fengshu." Seeing that Immortal was completely at a loss when faced with Luo Fengshu's enthusiasm, Xianxia couldn't help but smile. He said, "Junior martial brother Yi, I'll report your matter to Grandmaster first. You can go with Fengshu." He then said to Luo Fengshu, "Fengshu, I'll leave her to you. You have to do your job well." Luo Fengshu smiled and said playfully, "I know. Martial uncle, you haven't come back for a long time. You should go and pay your respects to Grandmaster first. I'll take good care of her." Facing the lively Luo Fengshu, Xianxia seemed to be somewhat helpless. Without saying anything, he waved his hand and left. Immortal watched as his figure disappeared. He didn't say anything else to her and didn't look at her again. Immortal's mood was a bit complicated. The journey from Mount Yunwu to Xianxia School was almost across the entire Kunwu mountain range. They walked for 2 whole months. During these 2 months, the two of them had become many times closer. Perhaps it was because Xianxia had been taught by a famous teacher since he was a child, but his knowledge was extensive. Not only did he tell her a lot of cultivation insights, but he also talked about a lot of things he had seen. In fact, his temperament wasn't as cold as it was when they first met. On the contrary, he was gentle and polite. When he talked, he made people feel like they were bathing in a spring breeze. Moreover, he helped her a lot. When she realized that she was starting to rely on him, she realized that the situation wasn't good. She made a prompt decision and distanced herself from him. She came from a prestigious school and he also had a high-level elder. Even if they performed dual cultivation together, with her aptitude, she definitely wouldn't have any hope, so why should she be delusional? Therefore, when she realized that she was a bit moved, she rationally cut it off. This was the first time she developed a different kind of feeling towards a person. Even she herself was surprised that she could make such a rational decision. However, she didn't feel like she was struggling because she never had such firm confidence that she would go further on the path of cultivation. She approached the highest Immortal's cave on Clear Spring Peak. Although it was called an Immortal's cave, it would be better to call it a palace. Although it was located in the belly of the mountain, the entrance was completely palace-like. When the disciple guarding the entrance saw him, he called out in surprise, "Martial Uncle Shoujing, you're back." He nodded and asked, "Is Grandmaster here?" The disciple answered, "He's here. Please come in." After stepping through the entrance, they saw that the ground inside was paved with spirit jades and the walls were made of strange stones. Although it wasn't dazzling with gold and jade, it had an indescribable air of nobility. Inside the main hall, a middle-aged man wearing a golden crown and a king's robe was reclining on a dragon-carved bed. A woman was massaging his legs while another woman was peeling grapes for him. This middle-aged man who looked like a secular emperor was actually a nascent soul cultivator. After he swallowed the grapes the beauty brought to his mouth, he finally took the time to look at Xianxia. "Where did you go this time? You actually didn't come back for 3 years. You recovered your cultivation level?" Xianxia ignored the man's behavior, which was like that of a secular, incapable emperor. He picked up a chair, sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. "What else could I have done? Of course, I was looking for spiritual medicines to treat injuries. I also took the opportunity to look for some body refining techniques in preparation for my nascent soul formation." The man raised his eyebrows. "That's more than that, right? You obviously brought back a little girl. What, are you finally tempted by her? Do you think I'm like you?" She said bluntly. He then frowned and said, "How did you know she was a woman?" Clearly. "Do you think you can hide from my eyes that have seen countless women just by wearing men's clothes?" "Oh no, it's my divine sense." After talking to himself for a while, the man swallowed another grape and comfortably changed his posture. He stared at Xianxia and said, "Tell me, since you brought her back, she's definitely not an ordinary woman. What's going on?" Xianxia didn't argue with him anymore. He thought for a while and said, "Master, if Immortal heard the way he addressed her, she would definitely understand his real identity." Clear Spring Peak was Patriarch Jinghe's cultivation place. Since this middle-aged man was a nascent soul cultivator, he was naturally Qin Jinghe. There were only a few people in the entire Xianxia school who could call him master. "Master, please accept her as our disciple." Qin Jinghe, who was eating grapes, almost choked when he heard what Immortal said. He swallowed the grape in his mouth, thought for a while, then waved the two women away and finally sat up straight. "You want me to accept her as my disciple? Who's this woman? She's actually worthy of your attention?" She didn't answer the latter question. He only said, "I just want you to accept her as your registered disciple. I'll take care of everything else." "Tell me who she is first." She had no choice but to tell him, "Do you remember someone entrusted an orphan to me 20 years ago?" Qin Jinghe, who didn't look like a nascent soul cultivator at all but more like a fatuous and mediocre monarch in the secular world, thought for a while and understood. "Oh, so she's that family's girl. Alas, I'm really disappointed. I thought you were enlightened." He then lay back down, but this time, he didn't have a beauty to serve him, so he used a spell to peel the grape. Seeing his behavior, she felt even more helpless. "Master?" the man said discontentedly. I'm your granduncle and also your master. Can't you be a bit more respectful?" "Can you blame me for being disrespectful?" She wasn't polite at all. "Look at yourself. Do you look like an elder? You brat, the man jumped up. You're obviously taught by me, so why are you acting like those smelly old Daoists, who said that cultivators have to be pure in heart and few in desires? Only by wholeheartedly cultivating can one achieve success? Didn't I, your master, cultivate to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm? I'm just talking about acting like an elder. I didn't. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Smelly brat, you just came back, but you're already making me angry. Xianxia was about to explain, but he was retorted. He could only take back what he wanted to say and spread his hands. Fine, whatever you say. Who told you to be an elder? In any case, he was already used to it. That's more like it. He continued to eat grapes with satisfaction. After a while, Xianxia said, "Tell me your plan first. I remember the disciple you sent 10 years ago brought back news saying this girl really has a pure constitution?" Xianxia nodded. Correct. In fact, her spiritual roots aren't good, but she's very diligent and has a good perception. With some nurturing, she might be able to become useful. Become useful? Are you talking about the core formation realm? Xianxia shook his head. Don't use your example on other people. Brat, you have double spiritual roots, so you won't be burdened by your aptitude. I remember that child has 5 spiritual roots, right? For a cultivator with 5 spiritual roots, no matter how diligent she is and how good her perception is, it'll be very difficult for her to achieve anything. If she can build her foundation, she'll already be thanking the gods. Xianxia didn't refute him. Master, since you think so, how about we make a bet? You said she can build her foundation at most, but I said she can definitely form her gold core. Xianxia, who was sitting on the bed, stopped and looked at him thoughtfully. Where do you get your confidence from? Not to mention a cultivator with 5 spiritual roots, there are many cultivators with double spiritual roots like you who are stuck in the foundation building realm. You said she can definitely build her foundation. Did you discover something? Xianxia shook his head and only said one word, intuition. Xianxia paused and curled his lips disdainfully. Forget it. Don't forget, no matter how awesome you are, you're only in the middle stage of the core formation realm. How can you compare to me in sensing the mandate of heaven? Xianxia sneered at him. Master, are you really that awesome? I remember you said it would take me 200 years to advance to the core formation realm. What happened in the end? It only took me 70 years to form my gold core. I'm afraid I'll form my nascent soul in 200 years. Xianxia's face reddened, but in the next second he said confidently, there are errors in sensing the mandate of heaven, okay? Don't be complacent. Forming your nascent soul in 200 years? How many years has it been since someone appeared in the celestial pole? I'm telling you, don't think forming your nascent soul is as easy as forming your gold core. Back then, I was already a genius, but I only formed my nascent soul when I was almost 400 years old. Then Master, you're betting she can't form her gold core? The topic changed too fast, so Xianxia paused for a moment and said angrily, who said I was betting with you? Brat, go away. You're always scheming against me. Wait, I want to ask you what you want to do with her, not discuss her future with you. Don't change the topic. Chapter 96. Tiange, are you, the disciple martial uncle accepted from outside? Mo Tiange swore that Luo Fengxue didn't have good intentions when she asked her this question. However, Luo Fengxue's bad intentions were too open, so she didn't seem malicious at all. Instead, it seemed like she was just playing around with friends. Mo Tiange didn't know what to do. Ever since she was a child, she only had a little girl's friendship with Tianxiao. Apart from her, she had never had a close friend. But Luo Fengxue was really too enthusiastic and acted too friendly. They just met, but she was already so intimate. Even Murong Yen wasn't like this when she first met her. Senior Martial Sister Luo, I told you not to call me Senior Martial Sister Luo. Just call me Fengxue. But those disciples just now all called me that, because I'm not familiar with them. I'm not familiar with you either, okay? Mo Tiange swallowed her words in time. Luo Fengxue approached her again with a curious expression on her face. I seem to have heard Martial Uncle call you Junior Martial Brother Yi just now. What's going on? How was he supposed to explain the connection between these two things to others? But facing Luo Fengxue's curious and harmless expression, she couldn't refuse. Because Senior Martial Brother Qin? Luo Fengxue screamed, startling Mo Tiange so much that she almost dropped the sect identity tablet she just received. Luo Fengxue grabbed her and shouted, Senior Martial Brother Qin? Her voice was so loud that the people passing by all turned to look at her. Luo Fengxue pulled her to a corner and whispered, Did Martial Uncle go to some cultivation group? Mo Tiange nodded. Seeing Luo Fengxue's reaction, she carefully worded her words. I was originally in East Kunwu. I entered a cultivation group through the Immortals Assembly and met Senior Martial Brother Qin there. Oh. Luo Fengxue calmed down a bit and asked again, Martial Uncle called you Junior Martial Brother. Have you been pretending to be a man? There was nothing to hide. In Xianxia school, there was Master Daoist Shoujing who knew most of her secrets and Qin Shi who heard about her experiences. These things would be known sooner or later. Luo Fengxue thought about it and temporarily accepted this explanation. Then, why did Martial Uncle bring you back? Because, Senior Sister Luo, it's a bit complicated. Can we talk about it later? Luo Fengxue was stunned. Once she saw Mo Tiange's expression, she chuckled and said, I almost forgot. You came from afar, so I should let you rest after you finished your business. We're done with the registration. Let's go get some clothes and ask where you'll be staying. Let's go. Mo Tiange secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She really would not associate with such an overly enthusiastic person, and she felt that there was something wrong with this. However, although this senior sister Luo was a bit naggy, she was quite capable. Following behind her, the matter of entering the sect was handled properly. It was no wonder that she could become a deacon disciple. These are your clothes. We aura refining disciples must wear it. However, aren't you going to build your foundation soon? After reaching the foundation establishment realm, one could receive a new design or make their own, as long as the sect's totem was embroidered on it. Of course, if you form your gold core one day, you can wear whatever you want. Mo Tiange took the clothes and listened to Luo Fengxue's endless chatter. Xianxia school was an orthodox Dao school, so the sect's clothes were naturally Daoist robes. The white robes and blue coats were very simple and tidy. However, she didn't know what kind of material it was made of. It felt soft and smooth, but it was also very tough and had a faint spiritual aura. Compared to Yunwu sect's black robes, it looked more like a spirit tool. Our Xianxia school's Daoist robes are woven from Mount Taikong's unique cloud brocade. After being burned by innate true fire, wearing it is very beneficial in fights of magical powers, so it can also be considered a spirit tool. Sure enough. Mo Tiange stroked the robes and sighed. It's really unusual. Luo Fengxue smiled and said, This isn't unique to our Xianxia school. Tiandao sect, Gujian sect, and Biyun sect also do this. Luo Fengxue didn't think it was strange, but Mo Tiange knew it was. Sure enough, this was the work of a big cultivation group. Not only was the Mountain Gate's spirit vein excellent, but the sect's strength could also be seen from its small details. Every disciple had several sets of clothes and had to change them frequently. There were at least several thousand disciples in the sect, and all of them were refined into spirit tools. How could ordinary cultivation groups afford this? After they finished collecting their belongings, Luo Fengxue was just about to take Mo Tiange to ask about her living arrangements when someone came to send her a message. Fengxue, Martial Uncle Xianin wants you to go and take your new junior martial sister. The person who came to pass the message was a 17 or 18-year-old youngster. Sure enough, he directly called her by her name. Got it? Luo Fengxue turned around and said, It seems Martial Uncle has already reported to Grandmaster and decided how to arrange you. Let's go. Mo Tiange answered, feeling a bit nervous. Seeing her like this, Luo Fengxue comforted her. Don't worry. My master is Grandmaster's #1 disciple now. If he wants to see you, he obviously values you very much. At the very least, he'll let you become an inner disciple. What she said made sense. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then asked, Senior Martial Sister Luo, is Master Daoist Shoujing also at Clear Spring Peak? Luo Fengshue's expression became a bit strange when she asked this question, but she soon smiled and said, Of course. Martial Uncle Shoujing is Grandmaster's blood-related junior and also a direct disciple, so he's naturally at Clear Spring Peak. Why do you want to know this? Mo Tiange said, Senior Martial Brother Qin can take me to Xianxia School because my late father has some relationship with Master Daoist Shoujing. Oh, I see. Luo Fengshue rolled her eyes and said, However, you might not be able to see Martial Uncle Shoujing right now. There are so many martial uncles in Clear Spring Peak, but Martial Uncle Shoujing is the most hard-working in his cultivation. He rarely even comes out to give sermons. If he's not in closed-door meditation, he's wandering outside. Oh no, he's traveling. Even advanced inner disciples of core formation elders like us have a hard time meeting him. Mo Tiange wasn't disappointed. She said, It's good enough that he accepted me into Xianxia School. Whether I can see him or not isn't important. Thank you for telling me, Senior Martial Sister Luo. You're too polite. I already told you to call me Fengshue. Seeing that Luo Fengshue was trying to curry favor with her, Mo Tiange hastily said, Senior Martial Sister Luo, why do the core formation grandmasters in the school only call each other by their first names and not their surnames? Luo Fengshue was puzzled for a moment before she finally understood. She explained with a smile, That's not it. Xianxia School is an orthodox Dao school, so we naturally have to follow Dao school rules. Aura-refining disciples and foundation-building disciples don't have titles before they succeed in their cultivation. However, once they form their gold cores, the school will grant them a Daoist name. In the future, they'll be called by their Daoist name. Only people close to them can call them by their real names. For example, my master's Daoist name is Xianin. His original surname is Ma, so people call him Ma Xianin. As for his real name, no one knows for a long time. I see. Also, core formation cultivators are called Master Daoist, but if they advance into the nascent soul realm, they'll be called Lord Daoist. My master's name in the outside world is Master Daoist Xianin, while my grandmaster is Lord Daoist Jinghe. Mo Tiange had never heard of such a form of address before, so she asked, If I form my gold core one day, won't I still be called Mo Tiange? A hint of amazement flashed in Luo Fengshue's eyes. She smiled and said, If you form your gold core, the elders in the school will grant you a Daoist name. From then on, the disciples in the school will call you by your Daoist name. However, Tiange, since you're really confident, you must be extraordinarily talented, right? Mo Tiange shook her head. It's just an example. I haven't built my foundation yet, so how could I form my gold core? That's too far away. As they spoke, the two of them arrived at their destination. This place had green mountains and clear waters, and spiritual aura lingered in the air. It was indeed a good place to open an immortal's cave. Luo Fengshue used the identity tablet to open the restriction and led Mo Tiange directly into the cave. They bypassed the protective formation and pushed open the stone door. Before Luo Fengshue even entered, she already called out loudly, Master! Mo Tiange followed Luo Fengshue into the hall and saw a dignified Daoist in his 40s sitting inside. When the Daoist saw Luo Fengshue, he glared at her. Why are you making so much noise? Luo Fengshue wasn't afraid at all. She giggled and said, Disciple just wants to see Master, right? Master, why are you still blaming me? Upon seeing her mischievous smile, the Daoist felt angry and amused at the same time. You're the only one who knows how to talk. All right, go to the side. With proper business in front of them, Luo Fengshue didn't dare to cause trouble. She obediently stood to the side and reported, Master, this is the new junior martial sister Mo Tiange. Did you ask me to bring her here because you want to accept her as your disciple? The Daoist didn't answer and just shifted his gaze to Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange knew the person in front of her was Master Daoist Xianin, so she bowed and saluted him. Junior Mo Tiange greets Senior Xianin. No need to be so polite. Master Daoist Xianyin was very good-natured. He said gently, "Come here." Although this wasn't her first time seeing a core formation senior, it was her first time facing him directly. Tiange was a bit nervous, but she still calmly walked towards him. Master Daoist Xianyin reached out and grabbed her wrist. A gentle but thick spiritual aura immediately poured into her meridians. A moment later, Master Daoist Xianyin was slightly surprised. "Your spiritual roots?" Tiange's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that because my spiritual roots aren't good, he doesn't plan to accept me as a disciple? 5 spiritual roots, and all of them are equally strong and weak. Could this be the rumored spiritual roots of the origin? Tiange's heart skipped a beat. Master Daoist Xianyin knows about the spiritual roots of the origin? Upon seeing her expression, Master Daoist Xianyin showed a faint smile and let go of her hand. "It seems you know about the uniqueness of your spiritual roots. Can you tell me where you learned about them?" Although Master Daoist Xianyin's attitude was cordial, he was a core formation cultivator after all, so Tiange didn't dare to deceive him. Several thousand years ago, a cultivator also appeared in Junior's clan. That ancestor cultivated until the nascent soul realm, but his lifespan was exhausted and he still couldn't advance to the next realm. Thus, before he passed away, he left a wisp of his primordial spirit in the clan. Junior has spiritual roots, so the restriction my ancestor left behind was triggered. Junior then passed on the cultivation technique and told Junior that my spiritual roots are the spiritual roots of the origin. So that's what happened? Master Daoist Xianyin stroked his beard and nodded. Your ancestor lived several thousand years ago, so it's no wonder he knows about the spiritual roots of the origin. Tiange carefully observed Master Daoist Xianyin's expression. After pondering for a moment, she asked, "Ever since Junior set foot on the path of immortality, I've always wanted to know about the spiritual roots of the origin. Since Senior knows this is the spiritual roots of the origin, do you know about its mysteries?" Master Daoist Xianyin stared at her and shook his head regretfully. "Many years ago, my master mentioned the spiritual roots of the origin by chance. It seems there's something special about it, but I don't know what it is." Tiange couldn't help but feel disappointed when she didn't get an answer. Master Daoist Xianyin smiled and said, "Let's not talk about this first. Tiange, I asked Feng Shui to call you here because I wanted to talk about you entering the school." Upon hearing him mentioning business, Tiange immediately adjusted her mood and said respectfully, "Senior, please speak." Master Daoist Xianyin's expression became serious. He stared at her and asked solemnly, "Tiange, since you entered Xianqing School, Lord Daoist Jinghe of Clear Spring Peak wants to accept you as his registered disciple. Are you willing?" "Ah." The one who cried out involuntarily was Luo Feng Shui, who had been standing on the side. She stared at Tiange in astonishment. She always thought since Tiange was brought back by martial uncle Shoujing, she would most likely be accepted as a disciple by one of the martial uncles. She never expected it would actually be Grandmaster. Tiange was even more astonished. She was originally just an ordinary little cultivator. Not to mention a nascent soul cultivator's registered disciple, she never thought she'd be an elite disciple. On this trip to Xianqing School, out of respect for Master Daoist Shoujing, Xianqing School was already very kind to accept her. She never expected. Could it be that Xianqing School still had ulterior motives towards her? Tiange. Junior is here. She calmed herself down, but she still couldn't hide her nervousness. Upon seeing her expression, Master Daoist Xianyin smiled and said gently, "Don't think too much. Master only accepted you as a registered disciple out of respect for junior martial brother Shoujing. Before you form your gold core, you'll be taught by me, and your seniority will be the same as mine. If you form your gold core one day, Master will officially accept you as his inner disciple." This explanation calmed Tiange down. Her identity was the same as Luo Feng Shui's. Master only gave her a brighter future. In the future, if she really formed her gold core, it would be very normal for a nascent soul cultivator to accept her as a disciple. However, she also knew that being a nascent soul cultivator's registered disciple was currently an enormous honor for a small aura refining disciple like her. She immediately brushed off her robes, knelt down and said respectfully, "Senior is accepting me as a disciple on behalf of Master. Please accept this junior's master-disciple ceremony." Master Daoist Xianxia watched with a smile. It was only after Mo Tiange respectfully kowtowed 3 times that he helped her up. "From now on, you'll be with Fengxue. As for how to address me, you can call me Martial Uncle. I hope one day, you can call me Senior Martial Brother." Chapter 97. Tiange, you're really lucky. Luo Fengxue was half envious and half joking. She looked at the sky and sighed. Grandmaster's registered disciple. Why can't I be this lucky? Mo Tiange just smiled without showing any joy. Aren't I the same as you now? I'll have to ask Senior Martial Sister Luo to take care of me in the future. Martial Uncle Xianxia said she'd be with Senior Martial Sister Luo in the future, so she'd have to take care of Senior Martial Sister Luo, who was very popular and capable. Luo Fengxue just said it casually, so she didn't take it seriously. She smiled and said, "Of course. You'll become my martial uncle in the future, so of course I have to take advantage of this opportunity to please you." The two of them chatted for a while before Luo Fengxue took her to settle down. Cultivation group disciples were divided into several categories. The general categories were part-time disciples, formal disciples, and elite disciples. When Mo Tiange was in Yunwu sect, she was only a formal disciple, which was above part-time disciples. She was also the most common disciple in the sect. She didn't have a master, so she could only listen to a senior's lecture together with hundreds or even thousands of people. As for elite disciples, they were disciples who had a master. Although seniority was determined by cultivation level in the cultivation world, the seniority of a real master was strictly regulated and wouldn't change with the change of cultivation level. Therefore, although Luo Fengxue was in the aura refining realm like her, she could call a senior in the core formation realm martial uncle. Disciples with a master were divided into several categories. Those with the lowest status were registered disciples. Registered disciples couldn't be regarded as real disciples because masters wouldn't teach them personally. Therefore, Mo Tiange could only be with Luo Fengxue now, which made her 1 generation lower. However, because the one who accepted her as a registered disciple was a nascent soul cultivator, her status was naturally different. Even Master Daoist Xianxia had to be polite to her. The most common ones were inner disciples. Those who were accepted by high-level cultivators were inner disciples and could receive guidance from their master. If their master was satisfied with their cultivation level, they would be promoted to an advanced disciple. Once they became an advanced disciple, their master would teach them some secret techniques and divine abilities, and they would be ranked in the sect. Master Daoist Xianxia was ranked first among Lord Daoist Jinghe's advanced disciples, so he was called the first disciple. Finally, the closest to him were his direct disciples. Direct disciples could obtain their master's true teachings, and they were also their master's successors. Generally, there would only be 1 or 2 direct disciples among all the disciples. Right now, Mo Tiange was only a registered disciple. However, because her master had an extraordinary identity and status, Luo Fengxue arranged for Mo Tiange to live next to Master Daoist Xianxia's Immortal's cave together with her fellow martial sisters. Originally, Luo Fengxue wanted to introduce Master Daoist Xianxia's several martial sisters to Mo Tiange, but they were either out or in closed-door meditation, so she had no choice but to drop the matter. Since Luo Fengxue was on duty today, she let Mo Tiange rest by herself. By the time Luo Fengxue left, Mo Tiange was already very tired, but she couldn't help but smile. She originally thought it would be hard for a large cultivation group like Xianqing School, where the relationships in the school were complicated and the disciples were arrogant, to adapt. Unexpectedly, the first person she came into contact with, Luo Fengxue, was kind and enthusiastic. Furthermore, this Grandmaster Jinghe also accepted her as a registered disciple. All of this was going too smoothly for her, making her feel as if it wasn't real. Ever since she stepped onto the path of immortality, she had always been struggling bitterly. She had never had such a bright future. She also wondered whether they had ulterior motives, just like her ancestor, Mo Yaoqing. It was only after she formed her gold core that she discovered the school had already decided her future. However, after thinking about it carefully, she felt there was nothing to worry about right now. Let alone the fact that she was only an aura-refining disciple. Even if Grandmaster Jinghe really harbored evil intentions, he could just use his cultivation level to force her. Why did he have to arrange these things? With this thought in mind, she settled down in a relaxed manner. Elite disciples were indeed elite disciples. The treatment they received was completely different from that of ordinary disciples. This place was very close to Master Daoist Xuanin's Immortal's cave. It was full of spiritual aura and had a quiet and beautiful environment. The people living in the vicinity were all female disciples of his school. Each of them had a small Immortal's cave, and each small Immortal's cave had several rooms. There was a lounge, a cultivation room, a pill concocting room, a spiritual beast room, and so on. The furnishings of the tables and chairs were all made of green jade. This was indeed an eye-opener for Mo Tiange. As far as she knew, even Yunwu Sect's foundation-building cultivators didn't have such a good Immortal's cave. This Xianxia school was indeed worthy of being one of the biggest cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole. The pleasant surprise of obtaining a good Immortal's cave made her forget her exhaustion, and she began to arrange it slowly. The lounge was the simplest. Now that she was already in the 10th layer of the aura-refining realm, she didn't really need to sleep, so she just arranged it casually. In the cultivation room, there were praying mats, a spirit-gathering formation, and some unimportant books. In the concocting room, she threw in the human furnace she bought in Tiandao's sect last time. There were also several empty rooms. She didn't have anything to arrange, but there was a medicinal field behind the Immortal's cave, which gave her some ideas. The Immortal's caves of these female disciples were all lined up side by side. Behind them was a small valley with several medicinal fields, most of which were filled with spiritual plants. Luo Fengxue said each Immortal's cave had a medicinal field, and the owner of the Immortal's cave could do whatever he wanted with it. Mo Tiange already planned to start learning how to concoct medicinal pills. This place was full of spiritual aura, so it was indeed a good place to plant spiritual plants. She planned to ask Luo Fengxue tomorrow where she could get seeds. While Mo Tiange was busily arranging her Immortal's cave, Lord Daoist Jinghe was still leaning on his dragon couch in the tallest Immortal's cave on Clear Spring Peak. However, this time, there were no beauties to serve him, and there were no grapes to eat. Instead, he was lazily flipping through a book. After reading for a while, he sneered and said disdainfully, "What kind of rotten thing is this? Do ancient cultivators use this kind of animal skin to make paper? They don't even know they've been deceived." He waved the book and threw it towards Master Daoist Xianin, who was sitting below. Master Daoist Xianin caught the book. His expression was twisted, but he still retained a trace of hope. He asked, "Master, is it really fake?" Qin Jinghe sat up and took the tea handed to him by his disciple. He pursed his lips and said, "Yes, it's fake." From the distant past era to the Middle Ages, frost stone beasts only existed in the south of the mountain, and their numbers were extremely small. Later, during the Middle Ages, when the righteous and devil paths fought against each other and the world changed, the number of frost stone beasts increased. Not to mention the material of this book, the content alone is specious. It can deceive a core formation cultivator like you. You want to deceive me? No way. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Perhaps because Master Daoist Xuanin's expression was too distressed, Qin Jinghe asked, "How much did you spend?" 300. Only 300 spirit stones? Oh, forget it then. Not to mention him, even core formation cultivators wouldn't care about such a small amount of money. However, Master Daoist Xianin said, "Master, it's 300 mid-grade spirit stones." What? Qin Jinghe jumped. In the cultivation world, low-grade spirit stones were commonly used. Mid-grade spirit stones weren't easy to find. 300 mid-grade spirit stones were more than 30,000 low-grade spirit stones. 300 mid-grade spirit stones. Brat, you're really... Qin Jinghe wanted to criticize him, but on second thought, he decided to let it go. Xianxia School was one of the best cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole, but core formation cultivators only earned a few thousand spirit stones a year. This time, he was deceived. You're really regressing the more you live. Qin Jinghe couldn't accept the loss of spirit stones, so he cursed him fiercely. Speak. Which guy deceived you? I'm going to kill him and make him regret being born in this world. Master Daoist Xianin was also distressed. When he heard Qin Jinghe's words, he hastily said, Master, I also obtained it from an unknown place. I've never even seen that person's face, let alone looking for him. His master's killing intent was very heavy. Every time he killed someone, he would be reprimanded by the head elder. Then, when he came back, he would scold the troublemaker. Qin Jinghe didn't want to be reprimanded by his master like a 3-year-old child. Besides, he really didn't have any clues, so he already admitted defeat. Seeing that Qin Jinghe was about to say something, Master Daoist Xianin hastily said, Master, disciple has something to report to you. It's about that registered disciple you just accepted. The latter part of his words pulled Qin Jinghe's attention back. Master Daoist Xianin said cautiously, Master, I checked that Tiange's spiritual roots. It seems to be the spiritual roots of the origin you mentioned before. What? Qin Jinghe glared at him. Spiritual roots of the origin? You mean the spiritual roots of the origin that have all 5 spiritual roots and are equally strong and weak? Yes. Master Daoist Xianin looked at his expression and said doubtfully, Master, what's so mysterious about this spiritual root? I remember you said the spiritual roots of the origin is one of several kinds of special spiritual roots. It's not inferior to mutated spiritual roots and single spiritual roots. Unfortunately, it hasn't appeared in a long time. Qin Jinghe didn't answer him. Instead, he muttered to himself in disbelief, Spiritual roots of the origin? This girl is interesting. Pure Yin constitution is already hard to come by in 1,000 years, and spiritual roots of the origin haven't appeared in several thousand years. Unexpectedly, both of them appeared in her body. After thinking for a while, he remembered that his disciple was still here, so he said to Master Daoist Xianin, Do you know what Dao is when we cultivate? This question stunned Master Daoist Xianin for a moment. Xianxia School was a Dao school. When disciples entered the school, even if they were part-time disciples, they had to start with Daoist scriptures. The question, what is Dao, was both shallow and deep. Any disciple in the school could answer it, but even nascent soul cultivators couldn't give an exact answer. It was rare for Qin Jinghe to have the demeanor of a nascent soul cultivator. With a stern expression, he said, Dao is the heaven and earth, the universe, the void, the rules, the origin. It can even be considered as anything. However, in the distant past era, the so-called Dao mainly contained one meaning, balance. The so-called balance is balance, checks and balances, as well as permanence and eternity. With balance, the world can exist. With checks and balances, the rules can be maintained. Only in this way can the world be eternal. Master Daoist Xianin was startled. So, this spiritual roots of the origin is a kind of existence that completely conforms to the Dao of the distant past era? Qin Jinghe nodded slightly. With our current cultivation method, the fewer spiritual roots we have, the better it is because the spiritual aura entering the body counteracts each other. However, in the distant past era, there was another cultivation method. This. Master Daoist Xianin was dumbfounded. In other words, in the distant past era, this kind of spiritual roots of the origin was actually a heaven-gifted talent? Qin Jinghe heaved a sigh. Unfortunately, the distant past era was too long ago. In the Middle Ages era, the cultivation method was already changed. Nowadays, it's impossible to know the cultivation method of balance. What a pity. Chapter 98. A muffled sound came from inside the furnace. Tiange stopped the fire in her dantian and opened the furnace. The medicinal fragrance had already turned into a burnt smell, and the spiritual plants had also become a pile of dregs. She shook her head and poured away the dregs. She then scooped some water from the stone pit next to her and cleaned the furnace. She then put in the right amount of materials and continued to concoct medicinal pills. Although this immortal's cave was small, it had everything. There were many springs on Clear Spring Peak, and there was also spring water in the concocting room, so concocting medicinal pills was very convenient. The good environment and abundant spiritual aura made Tiange feel that concocting medicinal pills wasn't that boring. She also felt that carefully sensing the changes during concocting and grasping the subtle differences was also very fun. It had been almost a month since she came to Xianxia school, and she felt that her whole body was very relaxed. Here, she had her own immortal's cave and a core formation cultivator to guide her. She also didn't need to bear the shackles of her identity. Moreover, she was now an elite disciple of Xianxia school, so she received quite a lot of medicinal pills and spirit stones every month. She also had a share of the disciple quota issued by Master Daoist Xianin. This meant that she didn't need to worry about miscellaneous things and only needed to concentrate on cultivating. When she first came here, Martial Uncle Xianyin checked her cultivation situation and told her to first transform all the spiritual aura in her body into spiritual aura before building her foundation. These days, she followed Martial Uncle Xuanin's instructions and slowly condensed her spiritual aura. When she had free time, she slowly refined medicinal pills by herself. She didn't know whether it was because she was in a good mood or because she was overflowing with spiritual aura, but her success rate in concocting medicinal pills had also increased a lot. These days, her success rate in concocting basic medicinal pills had already reached 40%. This success rate was at the level of ordinary concoctions masters, so it made her a little more confident. In fact, her talent in concocting medicinal pills wasn't that bad. She also asked Luo Fengxue for seeds for the medicinal field behind the cave and planted them in her own medicinal field. However, she would have to wait at least 10 years for these medicinal plants to be usable. In addition, she also met several other martial sisters. Master Daoist Xianyin didn't have many female disciples. Including Luo Fengxue, he only had 3. The other 2 had already built their foundations. Eldest martial sister, Han Qingyu, had a steady personality and treated people kindly. According to Luo Fengxue, this eldest martial sister was very popular among her fellow martial brothers, and they also liked to get along with her. If they had any problems in the future, asking her for help would definitely be the right choice. Second martial sister Wei Jiasi had a rather arrogant temperament. After a brief meeting, she said she wanted to cultivate and returned to her own cave. Luo Fengxue secretly told Tiange that this second martial sister, who had always been proud of her outstanding talent, must have been jealous that Tiange was accepted as Grandmaster's registered disciple, so she didn't give Tiange any face. However, arrogant people were straightforward and would not take the initiative to bully others. It would be fine as long as they did not provoke her. Tiange just laughed it off. Back when she entered Yunwu sect, she lived by the principle of don't slap a smiling person when she interacted with her fellow disciples. She greeted everyone with a smile and didn't want to incur any enmity. Her current situation was more than 10 times better than Yunwu sect's, so how could she possibly take Xiaoxiao's cold face seriously? As for Qin Shi, ever since he brought her back, the two of them had never seen each other again. They didn't even ask about her. Tiange asked Luo Fengxue about Qin Shi's situation, but Luo Fengxue only told her that martial uncle was doing well and that he entered closed-door meditation right after he came back. Apparently, Luo Fengxue wasn't willing to say anything else. This news made Tiange feel a bit sour in her heart. She naturally knew that Xianxia school was his real sect and that the people here were closer to him than she was. It was just that, on the other hand, she also felt relieved. Even though she was now accepted as Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple, the difference between her and Qin Shi's status was still like heaven and earth. If they didn't meet again in the future, She could easily suppress her emotional fluctuations to avoid them becoming an inner demon in the future. In fact, she also thought about it carefully. Was this kind of feeling really the love between a man and a woman? She really hadn't experienced it before. She just felt that Xianxia was a bit more special than other people. She liked to see him very much and was somewhat reluctant to part with him when they were apart. But on second thought, she also felt that if he didn't exist and she didn't see him again, it wouldn't be so hard to bear. In the end, even she herself was confused. Maybe she was just worrying too much. Maybe she was just very grateful because he saved her in a desperate situation. Besides, when she was in pain from losing second uncle, he was by her side. Maybe she just transferred her feelings for second uncle to him. Inside the concocting room, the medicinal fragrance gradually became stronger. Xianxia sensed that the medicinal pills inside the furnace had already taken shape, so she withdrew her thoughts. She silently calculated in her heart and opened the furnace the moment she got the right control. Several light-colored medicinal pills lay at the bottom of the furnace, each of them clear and transparent. She picked up these medicinal pills, fiddled with them for a while, then poured them into the prepared jade bottle with satisfaction. The raw materials she bought in Tiandao sect were all used now, and her pill concocting skills also improved rapidly. Concocting these basic medicinal pills was no longer a problem, so she could try to concoct higher-level medicinal pills. She stopped concocting and adjusted her breath for a while in the concocting room, preparing to go out for a trip after she was done. Aside from the small town at the foot of the mountain, Xianxia School also had a small market square specially prepared for disciples. All the shops were opened by the school, and the people who came here were all disciples. The things they sold were of good quality and cheap. More importantly, it was very safe to do business here. Before she finished adjusting her breath, the formation outside the cave fluctuated and a sound-transmitting talisman flew in. Xianxia took it. The talisman burned without fire, and a familiar voice rang in her ears, "Junior Martial Brother Yi, I'm outside." Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't feel happy. Instead, she frowned. She really didn't want to see Xianxia right now. But he was already at the door, so how could she not see him? She sighed, stood up, straightened her clothes, and tried to show a normal smile. When she felt her mood didn't fluctuate, she went to the entrance of the cave. The stone door opened, and a person with his hands clasped behind his back appeared with his back facing her. He was wearing a loose robe with big sleeves, and his posture was tall and straight. Just by looking at his back, she could already feel his heroic spirit. His gaze was currently focused on something in the distance. When he heard the sound of the stone door opening, he turned around. Xianxia was dumbfounded when she turned around. She was familiar with the face of the person in front of her, but he gave off a completely unfamiliar feeling. She couldn't help but feel puzzled as she looked at the person in front of her. In terms of clothes, although the black clothes of ordinary Yunwu sect disciples were a bit plain, they weren't ugly. Why did this senior martial brother Qin look so inconspicuous before? Now, just by changing his attire, he felt that he was elegant and noble. She had never seen Lord Daoist Jinghe, but if she did, she would definitely find that Xianxia's current appearance was 50 to 60% similar to Lord Daoist Jinghe. While she was sizing up Xianxia was also sizing her up. For a moment, amazement flashed in his eyes. He didn't expect that this junior martial brother Yi, who didn't seem to have any makeup, would actually be so elegant and beautiful after changing into women's clothes. In fact, he also saw her wearing women's clothes several months ago, but at that time, she was too disheveled, so she quickly changed back into men's clothes, so he couldn't remember what she looked like afterwards. However, it only lasted for a moment before he reacted. He smiled naturally and said, "Junior martial brother Yi, you look much better in women's clothes than before." Xianxia's praise was too magnanimous, making Xianxia feel a bit ashamed of her own thoughts. Whether it was his attitude or the way they got along, Xianxia still treated her as junior martial brother Yi. Compared to him like this, she felt she wasn't sincere enough. Therefore, she also adjusted her mentality and teased him with a smile. "Senior martial brother Qin's appearance is also very different today. I'm curious. Senior martial brother, why do you pretend to be a waiter in Yunwu sect? Xianxia was stunned, but he couldn't help but laugh. Waiter, this is a good metaphor. Once he finished laughing, he shook his head and said, Junior martial brother Yi, you're still as quick-witted as ever. I'm relieved now. Emotienga was stunned by his words, but a warm feeling slowly welled up in her heart. She could feel that Xianxia's mind was magnanimous. What he said had nothing to do with the feelings between a man and a woman. This was a kind of concern without any ulterior motives, so it made her feel even more warm. She couldn't help but wonder whether this kind of feeling was better than the feelings between a man and a woman she expected. Junior martial brother Yi? Upon hearing his voice, Emotienga finally realized the two of them had been standing at the door. She hastily moved to the side and said, Sorry, senior martial brother Qin. Come in and take a seat. Qin, she looked around and said implicitly, I came to deliver something. Several senior martial sisters lived here, so Emotienga understood he wanted to avoid arousing suspicion, so she didn't force him. She just smiled and said, Senior martial brother Qin, do you have any treasures to give me? Qin, she took out a half-foot square box inlaid with gold and jade from his Qingkuan bag and handed it to her. I went into closed-door meditation to stabilize my realm after I came back, so I never thought about it. Now that I'm out of closed-door meditation, I finally remembered that your identity is different now and you might need these things. His expression was very strange, and his eyes seemed to be wandering, as if he was embarrassed. Emotienga felt even more baffled. She took the box suspiciously, opened the lid, and was stunned. Qin, she coughed and said, These aren't treasures. These are just gifts from the secular world's Qin clan. Gold, silver, and jewelry are useless to us cultivators, so we've been throwing them away. But presumably, you female cultivators still need them. Emotienga picked up a hairpin from the box. It was made of light green warm jade and had a bright luster. There were no unnecessary carvings on it. It was simple, elegant, and exquisite. She never thought someone would actually give her something to dress up after she regained her female body. She was excited, but she just slowly exhaled and closed the box. She then looked up and said with a smile, Thank you. I've never used such precious things. Seeing her calm reaction, Qin, she heaved a sigh of relief and also smiled. What precious? They're just some mundane things. It's good if you have some use for them. How is it not precious? This is the first time I've received jewelry. Emotienga suddenly stopped talking because she felt these words seemed a bit ambiguous. Damn it. Didn't I just want to be frank with him? Why does it seem wrong in the blink of an eye? Qin, she didn't feel anything and continued to say, I think so too. Junior martial brother Yi. He paused, shook his head, and said with a smile, No, with your current appearance, it's not appropriate to always call you junior martial brother. Junior martial sister Emo? Emotienga was stunned. This seems a bit strange. True. Qin, she raised his head and thought for a moment. How about we call each other by their names? Xiaonan or Tienga? Huh. This, seeing her expression, Qin, she couldn't help but laugh. It's just a joke, but I really don't know how to call you in the future. This was indeed a problem. In the future, he couldn't always call her junior martial brother Yi. It would make other people feel strange. Actually, I don't mind calling you by your name. In any case, he also called Fengxue by her name, so it wouldn't be strange if he called her by her name. Really? He stopped talking and looked to the side. At that moment, a person came out of the Immortal's cave next to them. She seemed to sense there were people here, so she looked over curiously. It was second martial sister Wei Jiasi. Qin, she calmly turned around and said with a smile, I'll go back first. Next time you need me, just send me a sound-transmitting talisman. Since there were other people watching from the side, Emotienga naturally wouldn't make him stay. She politely said, Thank you for today. See you later. Qin, she nodded and walked away. When he was far away, Emotienga turned around and greeted Wei Jiasi with a smile. Senior martial sister Wei. Wei Jiasi's expression was a bit strange. There was shock, confusion, and displeasure on her face. In the end, she just gave Tienga a faint glance and entered the Immortal's cave. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.